Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor David Connor, and I am Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would like to welcome those members of the public and press in attendance and those who are watching the live stream of this meeting via YouTube. Whilst the meeting is being held publicly, it is also being streamed via YouTube. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time that the minutes are produced. Please be aware that the only audio from the microphones will be captured on the live stream. Therefore, those invited to speak need to ensure their microphones are on when speaking and are as close to you as possible. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, can all present keep their microphones off except when invited to speak? Please ensure that the microphones is turned off when you have finished speaking. I would also ask that everyone ensures that their mobile phones are on silent or turned off for the duration of the meeting. With regard to the meeting, I must ask members of the public to refrain from interrupting. The only members of the public allowed to speak are those who are registered to do so. Anyone who speaks must do in a respectful and a polite manner. It is right there is meaningful discussion about the merits of applications, but we will not allow inappropriate language or personal attacks on councillors and their beliefs, on members of the public, or on officers' professional advice. We will now go to agenda item number 1, and I'd like to ask member services if we have got any apologies for absence. Over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies for absence today.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is to confirm and sign the minutes from the meeting of the 23rd of August 2023. Do I have a proposer to approve the minutes of August the 23rd? Councillor French, have I got a seconder? Councillor Gerstner, all those, just could have a hand show, all those in favour. I wasn't here and Councillor Hicks wasn't here, so thank you very much. That seems to be unanimous. Thank you for that. Those agenda items. Agenda item number 3, which is urgent items. There are none. Agenda item number 4 is declarations of interest. Member services will now go to each councillor in turn, and can you please state if you have anything to declare in relation to any agenda item today. Thank you. So, Jo, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Benny.
Thank you, Jo. I'm a member of Chatteris Town Council, and there's 2 applications here in Chatteris, but I was not in attendance when they were discussed by the planning subcommittee, and when the discussions were, if they were taken on these applications, I can't remember, at full council, I would have left the room or certainly taken no part in the discussion or debate. Also, there's 2 applications here today from Morton Hall. As always, I do know Matthew Hall. He's done work for me in the past, and he's also been involved in the Growing Fenland project of Chatteris, of which I'm chair of.
Thank you. Councillor Connor.
For me today, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs French.
Thank you. I'm a member of Marchtown Council, but don't take any part. Also, agenda item number 11, I will be taking part as I sit on a committee of several years by the applicant.
Thank you. Councillor Gerstner. Thank you. Councillor Hicks.
Also, me no declarations either.
Thank you. Councillor Mefferdon.
No declarations, thank you. No interest, thank you.
And Councillor Marks.
No declarations.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yep, thank you, Jo. So we'll now go to the main part of the meeting, the planning applications. Proposals are now being dealt with slightly differently. Members will still only make a proposal when invited to do so. However, in the interest of the management, the time management even, I will initially be looking for a proposal to go with officer recommendation. Clearly, if no such proposal is forthcoming, or if that proposal fails, then I'll be looking for a proposal to go against officer recommendation. Members are reminded that such a proposal should be accompanied by the planning reasons for doing so. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Nick Harding. He's the head of planning here at Fenland, to present application FYR22/1296F, agenda item number 5. So over to you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The application before you is for 9 dwellings. It was originally submitted as 10 dwellings, but due to officer concerns with regard to the design and layout of the scheme, a one dwelling reduction was achieved. The application site is edged in red. The properties will be using Ellingham Gardens as the point of access into the site. It also involves the demolition of a property that fronts Wenny Road, and two dwellings are going to be placed in the position occupied currently by the property to be demolished. The proposed development does involve the use of some land associated with number 24, and the land swap arrangement is proposed between the applicant and the owner and occupier of number 24. However, sufficient car parking for number 24 is going to be provided for. The two properties proposed at front Wenny Road are going to have parking to the rear, and you can see the car parking court that sits to the rear of number 24 quite clearly on the drawings there. These are the proposed house designs, and this shows the two properties that are going to replace that which is going to be demolished adjacent to number 24 on Wenny Road. And the bottom slide is the appearance of the dwellings in Ellingham Gardens as proposed, and you've got number 24 that fronts Wenny Road to the right hand side of that particular picture. So here's the layout, and it's got sort of vehicle turning evidenced on the home, so there's plenty of space for turning. County Highways did raise a concern in respect of the extent of the red line, which fell short of including the whole of the turning head at the bottom of Ellingham Gardens, where you've got number 20. Ellingham Gardens shown at the bottom of that slide on the right hand side. I've checked with the agent today, and they're happy to, subject to a resolution to grant, to extend the red line to include the whole of the turning head at Ellingham Gardens. That will enable the proposed condition for the top surfacing of Ellingham Gardens to be achieved along its whole length. Because obviously if the red line fell short, we wouldn't be able to require the surfacing to take place. The other issue raised by Highways was whether or not the red line to the application covered all of the proposed development to the rear of 24. I have to say it wasn't clear on the drawings that had been supplied to us, just because of the scale of the red line location plan. However, this morning I've had from the agent confirmation that the application red line does include all of the land that you see in the proposed layout. So there's no issues there. Here are the slides. So you can see where the on the top left hand slide you've got the brick wall with vegetation behind it and the property to the left hand side. So that's all proposed for demolition to create space for the two dwellings that will front Wenny Road. Top right hand slide you've got number 24 Wenny Road on the right hand side, and this picture is looking up from its junction with Wenny Road up towards the existing development in Ellingham Gardens. Bottom left hand slide shows Ellingham Gardens access to the left hand side of number 24, which you can see the end elevation of in the foreground. And to the right hand side is a picture from the top of Ellingham Gardens looking towards Wenny Road, and the application site is the area that's fenced with vegetation behind it. So we're recommending approval subject to a number of conditions in relation to surface water archaeology, improvement of the highway and contaminated land, as well as a number of other issues, but those are the main ones. Any recommendation to approve or resolution to approve will be subject to that revision to the red line, so it includes the whole of Ellingham Gardens highway. That highway, by the way, is in private ownership, and we can't require that it is brought up to adoptable standard or adopted by the County Council. We have no authority to do that. So the recommendation is for approval, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Surprisingly, we have no speakers on this application, so I'd now like to invite members to put questions to officers. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Question for Nick. I know you've just outlined quite clearly, but for clarity, is Ellingham Gardens going to get the road surface that it should have had years ago out of this? Well, that's the thing. As a local councillor, I've been contacted by residents or a resident who lives there several years ago, and I looked into this. In fact, I wrote to you at the time, and you said that there is no way county will ever adopt this road. And we found out that the owner was in St Ives, but we could never find out who it was. You did the investigation of that. But the people in Ellingham Gardens have had nearly every Chatteris councillor. They chase them to try and get this resolved, and I see this as probably the best and only opportunity we are ever going to get the residents of Ellingham Gardens a top surface on their road. I actually went down there before I came today to have a look at it. Some of the ironworks are still raised. Is there any way that we can ensure that this, if this is approved, because if this does not include the surfacing of Ellingham Gardens, I can't support this application. I'm happy for the development, but Ellingham Gardens needs a top surface put in on that road. So what can we do to ensure that the residents in Ellingham Gardens get this roadway cleared up, and so it resolves a problem for every councillor from now until then, forever, because this will just keep coming back and back and back.
Through you, Chairman, condition 13 indicates that an improvement scheme is required to be submitted to us for approval, and any scheme that is approved through that process will have to be implemented prior to the first occupation of plots 1 and 2 of the development.
Thank you very much.
Councillor French.
Yes, thank you. Just to pick up something that Councillor Benny did say, County Council will adopt, but it's got to be up to an adoptable standard. And the new policy that was approved this year at County Council, any new adopted roads will be a 20-mile limit. So I do have the same concerns as Councillor Benny. I have, in my ward in Christchurch, County Council ward, a road that was built, or an estate that was built some 20 years ago, and it's still not complete, and nobody will take responsibility. So I would hate this to happen to another town.
I think we've all got those concerns, Councillor French. I'll come in here, I spoke to Nigel Edgar at CC Highways. I think he's the manager today regarding this application. This, in his opinion, will never ever be adopted unless they take all the binder course off and redo the drain. So, like Councillor Benny says, it's not in a very good state. In fact, it's a blooming mess, really. And we can't allow such things to continue, really. I've got certain sympathies. We've got one in Doddington. I'm sure Councillor Marks will come in there with one where he lives. You know, there's no way we can ask them to put up a bond, because we don't do that. On the last house, we can say, well, we'll put a bond up and we'll keep the house, or anything like that. And do they? And just as another problem, which he brought up, who owns the road already? That's the problem, because you can have a red line around wherever you want, but if the owner of the private road, so to speak, won't let you do whatever you want to do, you're in a catch-22 situation, aren't you? So he did point that out. He's been down there several times and spoke to possibly the same person that you spoke to, and she's very upset about it. And it's the sort of thing that I'm a little very disappointed that the agent or the applicant isn't here to answer these questions in front of us today. It's not a massive application, is it? But I think it justifies them coming before us. So that's me. Thank you. Councillor Mark, sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair.
hear everything living on an estate that was unadopted, and then we got it adopted. We were told by the solicitor it was going to be adopted, that the contractor walked away. My real concern is that even if we hear this will be covered, when will they actually do it, or will they just build the houses and then clear off as well? Personally, I think we should hear from the agency what guarantees they can actually give us before we make a decision on this.
Councillor Benny, you'd like to come back?
I mean, because this was brought to me as a ward councillor, I wasn't ward councillor for that at the time, but it was brought to me when I first became a Fenland councillor to look into it. And I spoke to other people who've been Fenland councillors, and they'd all been approached prior to me, and it was just like, well, here's a new councillor, let's see if he can do any good in it. But we couldn't. The actual site of Ellingham Gardens was done by a building company called Proctors, and they wanted to do some additional building work, and they put an application in, and Fenland said no, and they said, well, in that case, you cost us money, we ain't going to finish the road off, and they took all the assets out of the company. And that's what part of my investigation at the time, to find out what happened to this. That may or may not be right, but that was what I was told, and I'm fairly certain that that information was right at the time. And that's why it's been left like this, and it is a mess. And these residents, I know you could all club together and buy it, but at the time, another thing we looked at was the fact that, well, they could pay for the road to be done up. But now there's people who rent down there. Well, you can't expect somebody who's only renting somewhere on a short-term tenancy to put money in to make a road up. Nor can you expect the people who have bought the house to pay the extra to make that up to get this finished. But we've got residents down there with a road that is substandard. There is a management company associated with that piece of land. And through Nick, we found out at the time it was somebody in St Ives, but we never really found out who, because you could never get anybody to come back to contact to make any discussions with, to find out what their plans were for it. So there is a management company that covers Ellingham Gardens from the investigations we did before to try and resolve this. But like I say, if Ellingham Gardens is not brought up to adoptable standard, I am not concerned that it's not to adoptable standard, which is a high standard considering there's only a few properties there. But to get it to a nice standard, the curbs are in, the paths are there, the management company needs to take responsibility for the weeds that are growing there. I know County Council are not taking responsible for any weeds in Cambridgeshire at the moment, but it does look a mess down there, and that's what management company's for. And if we are going to allow more development in that area, then that needs to be taken on. We can't inflict, because these new houses will look out over Ellingham Gardens, and we can't allow that. I do agree with Councillor Marks. It's very disappointing that we haven't got somebody here from the agent today to actually, we could fire these questions at them. I came here today thinking I was going to ask for a deferment to get them here, so we could nail them down on this and get an answer to this. From hearing from Nick today of the conditions, it does look that way, but it would still be nice to have the agents here to actually get them here and to explain what they are going to do with this, and to make sure that the drainage scheme is right, because we don't want problems for the residents that are there, and we certainly don't want it for the residents that will be there and are going to overlook Ellingham Gardens. Their address will be Ellingham Gardens for all but two of the properties there. It's got to be right.
Their questions to Nick. Have you got any answers that you can address some of our problems before we go into debate?
Through you, Chairman, with the greatest respect to the applicant and the agent, yeah, they can't come here and make promises to you that are enforceable in any shape or form. At the end of the day, we're proposing condition, I think it was 13,
yeah.
And that is as much as we are able to do. We will be requiring a specification of the works that are going to be undertaken, and as I mentioned, there's a target by which those works have to be undertaken on site, and no matter what promises are given verbally by the applicant or the agent, it all comes back to that condition. And I think that provides as good as assurance as we're ever going to get. that the condition of the road is going to be improved. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Gerstner, and then I'll take Councillor Marks after that. Thank you.
Being given this information about the road, waste disposal and the taking away of rubbish and bins and bin men, how are they going to access this area?
Through you, bin collections are undertaken by FDC already, and the turning area is used by the refuse wagon, so there's no change to the existing arrangement.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you. So, Nick, you mentioned their improvement, but there doesn't seem to be what the improvement is going to be. I mean, not being rude, there could be a man with a wheelbarrow, put some tarmac down, and they could say it's an improvement. Is there no way we can ask for some sort of bond or specification before we make that decision as to what they're going to do? I know with Charmont Drive there was mention of a bond that was never taken up, but I think that was through CCC Highways.
Through you, Chairman, when it comes to roads being constructed and subsequently being adopted, a series of technical drawings are submitted to the County Council. Those go through what's known as technical approval, and also you have a legal agreement, and a bond is provided in order to cover the situation whereby partway through the works something untoward happens and the companies involved walk away from the site in some shape or form, and that way the County Council has some funds to draw on to complete the works. In terms of this, it's an unadopted highway. As a team, we're not highway engineers, so any scheme that gets submitted to us under condition 13, we would run past the County Council to see whether or not those works are sufficient in order to improve the quality of the top surface of the road. So we would take technical advice. So, and at the end of the day, given that these works have to be undertaken prior to occupation of plots 1 and 2, we have what I would see as good a time as any to take enforcement action if the works weren't undertaken at that point in time. So committee may, in relation to the wording of the condition, rather than relate specifically to plots 1 and 2, you might change that so that it refers to prior to occupation of any 2 plots on site.
Thank you, Dick. It's not, I'm being picky, but it just seems to me a bit woolly as to what we're going to end up with. A top surface dressing or whatever. I don't think we've got specifics in this, which I think we should have before, because it could be they could just roll some tarmac down and say, well, that's the improvement. Surely we should be working to a standard, whether it's adoptable or unadoptable, and hearing from the developer what they're proposing to do to make sure that it is an acceptable level.
Through you, that's the purpose of the condition. So they will submit to us a technical specification of the works that they're going to undertake. We will run that by the County Council highway engineers, and either it'll be good enough or it won't be good enough. That's the whole purpose behind the condition. That's the same. Through you, Chairman, in terms of the adoptable standard requirements, and I'm speaking very generally because I'm not a highway engineer, that goes all the way from, digging out base course levels, specification of the materials that you're using, etc., etc., etc. We're only talking about effectively the final wearing course of the highway, and to ensure that the specification of that is appropriate given the condition of the road. So, for example, it might well, County Council might advise us that it needs to be scraped before the new top surface is put on it, the wearing course. But that will all be dealt with by virtue of a condition condition submission, Chairman.
Councillor French.
Yeah, just get back on what Councillor Mark says. Unfortunately, there's a section 278 that developers can sign with County Council, but County Council cannot force them to sign it, and that is the biggest problem because the section 278s are quite expensive, and that is the bond.
Yeah, I can come back there. Reiterate what Councillor French said. I did speak, as I said earlier, to Nigel Edgar, and he tells me there's dozens and dozens and dozens at County Council that have not complied with what they said they were going to do. And there's no really any way after it's been done that County Council can do anything about it, only keep badgering them. So, okay, thanks. I'll just listen to what anybody else has got to say. Councillor Benny?
Another question maybe Nick can answer. There is already a management company set up for Ellingham Gardens that does nothing, can't even contact them, won't respond. So we might as well not have a management company if they're not going to carry out the job that they're supposed to do. I don't know whether they collect money from residents. I don't know. I can't remember. I probably did know, but I can't remember. But also with this development, are they going to take over the responsibility of the existing company to ensure that the streetlights and the roads are kept to good order, because that's the purpose of the management company, or will they set up a management company that is only responsible for the area of new development, which is going to leave us in exactly the same place? I mean, really, we need somebody here that can answer these questions. Nick doesn't know, and that's fair enough. It's not. This comes down to the developer. The developer should be here really to answer these questions, because it's important to know who's going to take responsibility of this, because the company that has the responsibility is not taking responsibility. They're shirking their responsibilities. And if we just pass that responsibility back to them and they carry on doing nothing, well, I've wasted my breath today even talking about it. So I really feel we need to have somebody here who can answer these questions.
Obviously Nick's been through it before, and obviously he can't make the agent force them to come before us, can we? It's up to us what we do. We see, so if you'd like to come back on.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the conundrum that's been outlined by Councillor Benny, but at the end of the day, we've got an existing development which is occupied that uses Ellingham Road, and if that management company is there to serve the existing residents, then it's the existing residents' responsibility to get the management company to do its job. The difficulty that we've got now is we've got an additional development taking place, but if the road is in the hands of the other management company, we can't double do. I think that we've got to be careful not to get involved in matters that are beyond our ability to control. At the end of the day, whilst it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, any solicitors advising those residents that are new residents that are going to be making use of Ellingham Road, the solicitor is going to make them aware that the road is a private road and that there are consequences associated with that in terms of its future condition, maintenance, and costs and responsibilities. So, I think we've got to be careful not to get involved in matters of minutiae detail that we don't need to be getting involved in.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah, I agree with Nick. We don't want to get involved in detail in planning, but as councillors, we are elected to represent the people who are in that ward. This is in my ward. And these people have had a rough deal. The company that sold the houses to them, they used their own solicitor. And because they used their own solicitor, or a solicitor that was recommended to them, the pitfalls of this were not highlighted, which is why I don't ever believe in using anyone else's solicitor. You find your own, because they then work for you. And this was another thing that came out when, and I certainly saw some paperwork, this is 3 or 4 years ago, and I can't be totally...
This is a question to Nick, is it? Because we can.
It is. But, as councillors, this is our job. We are here to represent the people within our ward. And I've got to be happy before I agree to this, And to be truthful, I'm not happy with how things are. I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy that somebody hasn't turned up. I know we can't make them, but if they're not prepared to come and answer the questions that I have for them, I certainly turn this one down without any hesitation, because I'm not happy with what the residents are getting. I don't want to turn it down. It's got a recommendation to approve, but I can certainly sit there and find some reasons to turn it down. Now, if I don't get these answers, I really am not happy with this, passing this today without having these questions answered. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and when the residents come back to me, they elected me. They're the people I represent, and that's my job. And it might not fit quite around the planning, and we're looking at minute detail, which I fully understand, Nick, and I get that entirely. But as a planning officer, planning is your bit. As an elected member, my bit is to look after my ward members. And I don't feel that I've got enough information here today, and no disrespect to you whatsoever, Nick, that's, you've done the report, that's fine. I just feel these agents should be here to answer these questions. I want to know which management company is going to be responsible for this, because the one we've got at the moment is not fit for purpose. So today, I don't feel I can pass this. I could quite happily sit here and find a reason to turn this down, or we could have a deferment and invite them to come back and answer these questions. And if they don't turn up, then they get what they get.
I think I'm going to come in there now. It's a good development. I can see the dilemma Nick's in. It's an excellent report, really, to be fair, officer report, one has to say. But I can see the dilemma Nick's in. I can see the dilemma that we're in. And I don't really want to see this committee turn this down, because it is 9 houses there. They are needed, and I think when the problems get solved, I think it'll be a really, really lovely little cul-de-sac and whatever it's going to be. So if we're going to do that, I ask the committee really not to turn it down, because there's no really reason to do that, but defer it for more information. I mean, I'm happy with that. I wouldn't be overly happy, to be honest, to turn it down in entirety, because I don't think it deserves that. Again, just to reiterate, I'm disappointed when I saw the speakers and they were not on the list of speakers, because this all could have been resolved today, and probably still can be, because we haven't taken a vote, have we? So, would you like to reply to my comments, Nick?
Thank you, Chairman. I think the key thing I'll reiterate to the committee is that you've got an existing development at Elland Gardens. You've got a management company in place already. Whilst it might not be working as well as it ought, that shouldn't be to the detriment of considering this application. The difficulty that you've got is that if you were going to refuse the application, on what grounds would it be? It's about the management and maintenance of a road which isn't directly in the control of this development, because it's in the hands of this other management company. So I think that we would be on a bit of a shooply peg in terms of a refusal here, Chairman.
Well, I wasn't looking, just a few minutes ago I said I wouldn't advise the committee to refuse it on those very, very reasons, but I could support a deferment if that's what the committee wanted. And obviously we can look at that when it obviously comes into debate, because we're still asking Nick. But I think we've gone as far as we can asking officer questions. We're just going round in circles, unless anybody else has got anything new to add. So I'll close that, because Nick's covered every point from an officer point of view. So we'll start the debate off now, I think. Yep, Councillor Hicks, please, yeah?
Can I just ask a question? Not ask a
Is that to officers?
No,
this is just to,
you're up to, I'm going to ask you, because this is in your ward, would you consider this to be a usable, quite adequate road, even if it wasn't adopted? Is it something which is serviceable in its state it's in now?
I don't think... I went back down there and had another look at it before I came here today, just so it was really clear in my mind how this is. And the road, yeah, I drive my car down there, but you've got to watch out for the ironworks that are sticking up. It doesn't do your car any good. the management company that should be responsible for the weeds are not. There are weeds growing everywhere down there. It looks a mess. And a mess, just to pass or refuse something on a mess is not a consideration, which I fully understand. But if we don't get this resolved, whilst we sort this application out, Ellingham Gardens will remain what it is, and it is substandard. It is not fit for purpose how it is. It's circumstance where it's ended up to where we are. But there is an opportunity here to put something right that is wrong. And as councillors, that's what we should be doing. The road surface, yes, you could drive a car down there, the bin lorry could get down there, but it is a mess because the management company is not working. I'd really like to know which management company is going to be responsible. I don't particularly want to turn this development down. I think that, in terms of a scheme, but it's got to bring some benefit with it, and the benefit is to tidy this area up because it is a mess. And if this company is included in that red line, they are taking responsibility for what's in that red line. If your boiler goes wrong, the minute the plumber turns up and he puts a spanner on your boiler, he is responsible for that job. And if they've drawn a line around this, and as Nick's clearly stated today, they've included the turning head in Ellingham Gardens, they want to take responsibility for it. I want to see that they are taking full responsibility. If they put a top surface down and tidy it up, which I'm sure it will, but the management company, nobody can get hold of. They're not doing the job that they should do. They're not managing this. And if this is left for them to sort it out, this will be another problem that just carries on and on and on. And I think for a little bit of discussion with the agent and maybe get an agreement, and I fully understand what Nick says, they can promise us jelly and ice cream to everybody when they finish the houses and they don't have to provide it. But at least if they've come here and they've given us some assurance as members, we have done everything we can to make a bad situation better. And we owe that to the residents who live there. And it's not very often you hear me speak as strongly against something like this when it comes to this matter. But on this one, I do feel strongly about it. I think it's not the council's fault. It's just circumstance how it's ended up. But we need a better resolution out of this. And this failed because the developer bankrupted the company and walked away. And that's really why it's left as it is. And I don't want to see the same thing happen again because it won't be the 10 residents of Ellingham Gardens. We're going to have 20 residents of Ellingham Gardens. Needs fixing. And I think we haven't got sufficient information in front of us because nobody's bothered to come and speak to us today on this. It's disappointing they haven't. I don't particularly want to see this turned down. I think it's a good thing. It will tidy up an area in Chatteris, which I do like to see. It benefits the area, but it's also got to benefit the residents of Ellingham Gardens. And that's why I personally would like to see a deferment on this and to see whether this agent can be bothered to turn up. And if he can't, well, then he gets what he gets, doesn't he?
Right, thank you, Councillor Benny. Councillor Gerson, are you going to put a new steer on this?
I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong. The Highways Development Manager 5.6 at the very bottom says, however, the LPA may wish to consider that it would be appropriate to condition that the applicant will remedy the existing defects along Ellingham Gardens in response to the proposed intensification. Well, that's all part of the development. So it says in here that the LPA, which is us, would be appropriate to condition that. So can we get some guidance on that, please?
Well, we can do when we come back into questions for officers after this, yeah? We can go back to that. Councillor Marks, I'm sure Nick has made a note of that, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I've lived on an unadopted road, and I have to say the worry and concern it caused a lot of residents, because what we didn't realise, none of us realised, was what the implications are. Should a sinkhole suddenly turn up at the front, we all are going to be paying for it. We're adding more people into a problem, and I don't see we've actually got a proper way of finding out what is going to happen regarding this top surface and how this is going to be managed at this point. And I personally think we do need to hear from the agent and get some sort of guarantee. I know it will only be a verbal guarantee, but as I agree with Councillor Benny, we have then tried. At the moment, if we let this go through, there's no it doesn't seem to be particularly, there's a specification. Nobody knows who's going to actually be running the management company. And I just think this is just a mess that we could actually impact more on. Fair credit, the officers have done absolutely everything they can, and I fully support the application and what the officers have done, because I would more than likely come to that conclusion apart from the road. And I think we are just asking for more and more trouble. And regarding the road being serviceable, yeah, the road is serviceable for vehicles. We have the same in Maney, where we have a constructor who went bankrupt on another development. What I didn't realise is people in wheelchairs can't get up, electric wheelchairs can't get up curbs. We've had all sorts of light issues. We've actually had some sewage issues as well. And all this impacts on the people, not only who are buying properties there, but the people who already live there. And you just get into a muddle. And I just think we would be, if we gave planning today, just adding to that muddle.
Take Councillor Hicks.
Okay, let's just assume that we get the agents back on this and we decide that we're going to let them have the say and defer this. They could say, yeah, we'll do this, that, and the other, and nothing gets done. There's no, I'd like to ask Nick in a moment if there's any legal remit to actually make them do this. I believe not. So what's the point in getting them back? Because they could just say anything they want to, and that we'd agree to it, and then it doesn't get done.
I think Councillor Marks sort of answered your question, and Councillor Benny really, by saying, well, we've done all we can. I think probably they're intimating that they're going to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and they've promised it, so they can go back to their residents, or Councillor Benny can, from Chatteris, and Councillor Marks as well, and say, well, we did our best, and when we've done due diligence here, I think probably that's the answer you're looking for. Councillor Marks.
If I can just come back on that. I think also, to a certain degree, there's a moral thing with here as well. Once you get a developer here and he realises what we're actually asking for and saying, that's part and parcel. But equally, it's more public for solicitors as well. And as Councillor Benny has said, if you use their own solicitor, at times they will, as they did with us, manoeuvre it so it looks right. Whereas if you use an independent solicitor, they will advise. And we've had on our estate, before the road was adopted, sellers and of the properties actually took their own personal bonds for the roadway and stuff like that. So I think we are then not, we're helping whoever the potential buyers are, for one, and also we're not creating more of a muddle, and that's where I can see we are today.
If I can come in there, it seems a deferment is likely, probably, reading between the lines. I think several people look down that line. As I said before, I wouldn't want to recommend this committee to refuse it, because I don't know what we could refuse it on, really. I think we'd be struggling to find enough reasons. But if we deferred it, it could come back next month, and all it takes is a little bit of tinkering about with, and the agent's there to give us some comfort on what they're saying. So we're not looking to throw it all out, so it's got to be redrawn again. All we need to do is invite the agents. So it could easily, I'm fairly certain, it could be brought on to next month's planning committee. And, so it's not going to be a big hold-up, is it? I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. Councillor Benny?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I've just sat here and gone back through my FDC emails, and I had discussions with Gary Edwards, who's part of the estates team at Fenland, over this. And the management company that runs Ellingham Gardens is Wenny Road Management Company, and its office address is 15 Station Road, St Ives. It's public information. And we could never get any response out of them, no response whatsoever. So if they're not doing the job now, who's to say they're going to do it in the future? Which is, I want to know what's going on. I want these answers before we pass this one.
I think we've sort of done this to death unless anybody can throw it any more on it. So I'm going to close the debate now. I think we've gone as far as we... Sorry, I was going to bring Nick in to answer Councillor Gerson's question, but I'm quite happy to Nick for you to come in now.
Thank you, Chairman. we never ask for the specification of a highway as part of a planning application that's before us for approval. So why are we wanting that level of detail in relation to this particular application? There's no justification for it. We've got a condition that asks for the details of what improvements are going to be made to Ellingham Gardens, and that is standard fare that's been in front of you many, many times before, and in relation to applications determined under delegated powers. So that's sort of the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that we could make an adjustment to condition 13 that not only asks for the details of how the road is going to be improved, but also the details of its ongoing maintenance. And then that should cover the point. Because if we go for a deferment, have the applicant agents here and they go, yes, as and when the houses get built, they'll be signed up to a management company, etc., etc. You don't have that as enshrined within your planning permission that you're granting. So that should give the committee sufficient reassurance on the issue of not only exactly what works are going to be undertaken to improve the road, but also that the details of how the road is going to be maintained in the future is going to be undertaken. Thank you, Chairman.
Yep, Councillor Gerstner, would you like to answer? Would you like to answer your ask your question to? Yeah. I think just read your question out again. So, if you'd just like to.
Well, it says here. However, the LPA may wish to consider it would be appropriate to condition that the applicant remedy the existing defects along Ellingham Road. So I'm just reading it from what the highways officer said. So if you're saying that can't be conditioned,
Through you, Chairman, we have got that in condition 13, so that's covered already.
So that answers that. Thank you.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you. I think to be fair to Nick, and Nick, I hear what you're saying, and also I think the officers, again, I'll reiterate, have done a great job in getting this to where it is. I think we're still a bit woolly as to what is required going forward, but just because we've done it in the past, perhaps that means that we've got it wrong in the past, and therefore maybe now we should focus in on things like road adoption and stuff more. As a committee, you know, perhaps we have got it wrong, and certainly I would say, certainly in FDC, with knowing what Mainie's had, Christchurch has had as well, you know, perhaps in the past we should have been more hotter on this. And I think we're actually just trying to solve a problem, because this will cause not only council's problem, but going forward it will cause the council problems, because I can guarantee there will be a system when the dust cart won't be allowed to go down there, so everybody will have dustbins all stacked at the end. That will then become another problem, and it will just go on. At least this way we get to the bottom of getting it sorted.
Well, just Nigel Edgar, as I said, he's got dozens, and he does Cambridgeshire as a rule, not just Fenland, obviously the other shires as well, and he's got dozens and dozens and dozens of these problems on his desk. Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong, Councillor Marks. I'm just saying what the highways manager told me today, and various other conversations we've had regarding an application site was built in Doddington. So, well, I think we're nearly done. Oh, okay, Nick.
A couple of things, if I may, Chair. First and foremost, when we grant planning permission for a brand new virgin development site, we cannot require the roads to be built to adoptable standard. The decision on whether or not the roads are going to be private or whether or not they're going to be adopted is purely in the hands of the developer. So if you've got in your mind, in relation to this development, that we want to try and get it adopted, you need to forget that. It's not within our gift whatsoever. The second thing, and to reiterate what I've said before, is when we grant planning permission for new developments now, we have a condition which requires the details of ongoing maintenance and management of those roads. And the reason why we have that condition is to countenance the situation that we have found ourselves in, or should I say the county council have, where developments have been built and the roads have remained private. So a change to the condition that I mentioned earlier, that adds in the requirement for a maintenance arrangement to be submitted to us and approved by us, is no different to the condition that we have on brand new developments. So that what I'm proposing to you now is just as good as we have on brand new developments, and therefore you're not any worse off. So I think the issue has been satisfactorily covered. If you defer the item and you have the applicant and the agent here, they can tell you all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, what matters is what details they submit and what details are approved by the authority in relation to how the road is going to be improved, and secondly, the ongoing maintenance arrangements for that road. Having said that, and perhaps to undermine what I've just said, if they say to us that a management company is going to be set up and it's going to be associated with all of the properties that will be using Ellingham Gardens from this actual proposal, in theory, there's nothing to stop that management company going belly up and us being in exactly the same boat. We can never resolve that situation. We can only do the best that we possibly can. And as I said, that slight variation to condition 13 that requires an ongoing management proposal to be put to us for approval is the best that we can do. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, so I think we're going round and round in circles here. Nick's has outlined the council case. So I think now we'll bring that to a close and we'll look for a proposer on this.
Which is to approve, Chairman.
To approve.
With variation to condition 13.
As you outlined.
To include the requirement for an ongoing maintenance proposal, and secondly, that the road improvements have to be in place prior to first occupation of the second house.
Okay. So, have I got a proposer to go with officer recommendation with those conditions in place? Councillor Gerstner? Okay, so you're proposing, Councillor Gerstner, to go with officer recommendation. Okay, who have we got a seconder? Councillor Hicks. So all those in favour of go with officer recommendation with those conditions in, please show of hands now.
That's 2 votes, Chairman.
Okay. Those against? 4, 5.
5 votes,
So I'm looking for another proposal here. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd like to propose that we defer this item and invite the agent and the developer to come here and explain what they are going to do about the management company. And I see what Nick says, but my job is to represent my residents, and I feel they've been failed before, and I'm not prepared to sit by and have that happen again.
Okay.
I would like for them to come here. I hope they turn up. And I know it's like a verbal guarantee. It doesn't mean anything, but at least to our residents, we have gone as far as we can to ensure. And I fully understand also that a management company can go bust, but we've got a management company that is failing, and if that is put in charge of the rest of this, we have compounded a problem. Okay. And I can't support something that, in my opinion, is going to make it worse.
Okay. So, yeah, so well done, that's great. I've got a seconder for that. Oh, sorry. You can't second that, can
Before
you?
we go to the votes, Chairman.
We haven't got a seconder yet, so we might fail. Okay. Now,
Thank you,
please
Chairman.
come in.
Just to remind members that we've gone for a deferment, and therefore, in terms of any other element of this scheme, the assumption is that you're happy with it. And it's only this issue of the ongoing maintenance of the highway that is of concern that you want to make some further inquiries on. So that means that when the application comes back to committee, that's the only topic that you'll be discussing and considering the scheme on. So I just want to make members aware.
That's my take of it. I think we're all sitting around. I know 2 didn't vote with it anyway, but I think 5 of us who did. I think that has satisfied members just to come back with that. Sorry, no, I'm just saying. But anyway, so we've got a proposition to go to defer this application by Councillor Benny, seconded by Councillor Marks. All those in favour of that, please.
5 votes.
All those against? Well, you've still got to put your hands up, haven't you? Anyway, so that application has been deferred. So thank you very much for that. It was a good officer report, but I could see the pitfalls of further on. So, right. So we'll move over again, hand over to Nick Harding to present applications FYR 23/0155F, agenda item number 6. So again, over to you, Nick, when you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We've got a planning application for 31 dwellings by Persimmon Homes, and notwithstanding the address shown on there, you're perhaps more familiar of this site as One Farm, and this is in effect a replan of a planning application, a planning permission that's been granted already, and basically the only difference between the 2 schemes is 4 additional dwellings on the site. The application site is outlined in red, and as you can see from the aerial photograph, work has started on putting the infrastructure in on the site. This is the proposed site layout. Naturally, it's slightly different from what was previously approved under the reserve matters, and it shows the relationship with the already approved dwellings around the site. Okay. This is the sort of detailed plan of what was approved under the reserve matters. So that's what's proposed, and that's what was previously approved. As I mentioned, we've got 4 additional dwellings on there. Some street scenes, nothing particular to highlight to you on those. And these are the photographs of the site. There's not a great deal to show, as the site is relatively flat and open in nature. So we are recommending approval. The key thing to draw to your attention is that because of the additional 4 units, we're raising a section 106 on the basis of £2,000 per plot, as per our what I'll call interim policy, and that is earmarked to be spent on the George Clare surgery. But what we want to do, as is becoming more frequent, is that if the monies aren't spent within 7 years, drawn down within 7 years, then we reserve the right to spend the money on any other item that was listed in the previous Section 106 agreement. And that enables us to spend the money rather than run the risk of having to return unspent funds to the applicant. So we are recommending approval, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Nick. We have 1 speaker on this application. I'd like to invite Anne Dew, the applicant, to make her presentation in committee. When you're nicely seated and comfortable, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Silver button.
When I turn mine off, sorry.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity for me to present to the committee. My name is Anne Dew and I'm the Head of Planning for Persimmon Homes East Midlands. The case officer has written a very comprehensive report and I do not intend to speak for long on this application. The site benefits from outline and reserved matters consent for 248 dwellings for which Persimmon Homes are currently building out. Her experience of selling from the site is that there is a great demand for the smaller houses and conversely less demand for the larger houses. In response to this demand, this application proposes a replan to the site which provides for a more varied mix with a greater proportion of the smaller family houses. Whilst this current application proposes 31 dwellings, 27 of these previously benefited from consent, thus in essence it's only additional 4 houses. No changes are proposed to the mix of affordable dwellings. Section 106 associated with the original consent for the 248 dwellings required the same £2,000 payment per dwelling, and that was to be spent on education, libraries and lifelong learning, and this contribution has already been paid. The replan application will increase the number of dwellings by 4, as I've mentioned, and in line with the Council's local plan and SIL viability assessment, a further £8,000 infrastructure contribution will be required and will be secured by the Section 106. The layout and design principles approved as part of this application have been followed in this replan. Through the consultation process, all technical consultees have confirmed their support for the proposal. As the officer states in her report, there is no valid reason to refuse the application given the site benefits from consent and is currently being built out for residential purposes. Thus, the comments from Minerals and Waste Planning Authority, whilst a policy, it's never going to be a minerals or waste site for that reason. In conclusion, this replan application will increase the number of dwellings on the site by 4 and will provide for a better mix of dwellings which accords with the housing demand in Chatteris. The application accords with national and local policy and is acceptable in planning terms. It is therefore considered the scheme should be approved. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I'd now like to invite members to put questions to Ms. Dew. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand, please. So any questions to Ms. Dew? Thanks. Questions to officers. Councillor Benny, thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. Question, Nick. You did say that the additional 106 money is going to the George Clare surgery.
Yep.
Thank you very much. If I could just tell members, I know it's in questions, but I went to George Clare surgery again as local residents in Chatteris, and I had quite a long chat with the practice manager there, and the building is owned by the trustees, who was John Sake and some of the doctors that originally set this up. And because it is privately owned, the surgery doesn't get funding for capital projects like extra building work. They have to source that money from elsewhere. And so therefore they need every penny they can get. At the moment there's 12,000 people registered on the books at George Clare. That site will take up to 17,000 people, but it will need additional building. And they've also been converting storage rooms into meeting rooms into surgeries and different storage areas. They're that short of money that one of the husbands of one of the ladies who works there has voluntarily gone and done some work to put some stud work up and to do the conversion out of his own pocket. Highly commendable. That should not be happening today. That we should not be expecting people to do that. And that's why I'm very, very pleased that this money is going to the George Clare surgery, because this money will be spent probably within 7 weeks if it hasn't been spent, let alone 7 years. They've also had a recruitment drive at the George Clare surgery, and they've been very successful at getting nurses and GPs to come and work there, which is why they need these extra rooms. I just want members to be aware this money is really going to help Chatteris.
Thank you. So after that, any more questions for officers? Councillor Marks, thank you.
On hearing what Councillor Benny's just said, how quickly, obviously it sounds like the money is needed sooner rather than later, how quickly would the drawdown on that money be?
I don't know.
And does it, no, how quickly does it get lodged with yourselves or lodged?
I don't think that we've had the conversation with Persimmon Homes when the sums that we've talked about, the £8,000, are going to be paid. We need to have that conversation, I believe. Please forgive me, committee. I'm stepping into the committee at the last moment, so I'm not 110% all over all of the applications. So I think Anne might give me a nod or a shake of the head. Yeah.
Okay, but obviously hearing what Councillor Benny has said, we would prefer it sooner rather than later, not on the last sale of the last property or whatever.
So normally it would be something around, I'd have to look at what it says in relation to the existing development and arrive at a kind of like an in-tune figure in relation to the existing development. But I would imagine it would be relatively quickly in relation to this particular phase. But obviously we have to have a project proposal from George Clare in order to then transfer any funds over.
The French.
Thank you. Under 5.20, Cambridge County Council Waste and Minerals, can you explain what the problem is?
Very briefly, since planning permission was granted, it outlined for the one farm. The site was identified as a minerals a waste site, but obviously because there is already an existent and extant plan permission for housing, the issue melts away.
Yes, and that was, I spoke to Deborah Jenkins, planning manager at Cambs County Council, and Persimmon didn't send in a reply to County Council's request. That was, she looked it up for me. So, but we can give that as much weight, or not as much weight as one likes, to give on that one. So you want to speak, Councillor X, didn't you? Okay.
Yeah, this is a question for Nick. Just to come back to this section 106 contributions, is it the council's, what is the normal position for the council regarding these contributions being paid? Is it a rule of thumb that they're paid before, after, or as they're built? I mean, or does it vary from application to application? In previous experience, what is the normal procedure for those payments to be made?
Through you, Chairman, it varies depending upon the type of development, scale of development, and any particular site circumstances. Very loosely speaking, if you have a development site of 1,000 homes, then you wouldn't expect them to make all of the payments for those 1,000 homes before they commence development, simply because of the infrastructure costs that they've got to stump up for in order to actually start above ground works. So it does vary significantly from development to development. In this particular case, we've got a development whereby, and I can't speak learnedly about what was in the original agreement for the outline, and as whether or not Persimmon Homes have paid early or paid as per the trigger requirement on the site. But if the Persimmon Homes paid at the correct trigger point and not before, then I think that given we're talking only about 4 additional dwellings, it would be quite appropriate to have that £8,000 paid relatively promptly on the commencement of this phase of the development.
Yeah, it's stage payments. I think that's what we're trying to get at. Any more questions for Nick before Councillor Benny? Thank you.
Thank you. The footpath that leads up to Tesco's roundabout, that was part of the original application that Persimmons were going to provide a footpath, and that at the time we wanted that footpath so that people who live there William Curve Terrace can walk down to Tesco's to come into the bypass through town, so children don't have to cross the road. That hasn't been forthcoming. Any details of when and to ensure that that is going to be delivered?
Through you, Chairman, I'm not in a position to be able to answer the question. I'm afraid I can find out and report back.
Yeah, perhaps that'd be a good. Perhaps you would give Councillor Benny, send him an email when you've got the answer to that. We don't expect you to know everything off the cuff, and we're thankful for you. We're thankful for you to come and present the applications at short notice today. So,
Chairman, if we could break with normal convention and maybe ask Anne
We
back
can.
to the table, she may well have
we
the
can
answer.
indeed, we can. If it clarifies anything, I'm more keen on it. Thanks.
Yes, there's a requirement on the outline planning permission that footway is provided, and we will be providing that footway. We're going through the section 278 process with Cambridgeshire County Council. We submitted that application, I think, back in March 2022, and it is still with the county, and we're waiting for them. I think they're fairly busy at the moment, but I can reassure you that footpath will be going in.
Thank you very much. It's just that that does raise its head as questions within the town. You pass that, they're building these houses. We haven't got the footpath yet, so no, as long as I've got that, I'm happy with the answer to that. Thank you very much.
I think the smile on Councillor French's face, because her and Councillor French and I are county councillors, we can actually believe in what you're saying there. It's not the quickest establishment to deal with, is it? Thank you. Right, so there we are with that one. Any more questions for Nick before we put it in debate? No, thank you once again for clarifying that. So we're going to open this up for debate. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Another 4 dwellings, another £8,000 for George Clare. Can't be bad. I actually had a ride down there a week or so ago and have a look, and I was surprised they're really getting on with the site. And it's pleased to see that it's moving forward. Thank you very much. Well done. If this makes better use of the land and the need is for smaller properties, this is a logical and a very sensible proposal to me, and I see no real reason to spend a long time debating this one. This one just needs passing.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. Anybody else want to add to this debate? No? Thank you for that. Officer, would you? No? So we're looking for a proposal now. Councillor Benny?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that we go with officer's recommendation to approve this and leave conditions and everything else, as always, to officers to agree with the department.
Okay, have we got a seconder for that? Councillor French. So we've got a proposition proposed by Councillor Benny, seconded by Councillor French. We go with officer recommendation and we leave the conditions to be dealt with by officers. All those in favour of that proposal, please put hands up.
It's a unanimous decision,
So, yeah, so that application has been approved. Thank you for that. So moving on, I now hand over to Danielle Brooke. She's the Senior Development Officer here at Fenland to present application FYR 23-0362/0, agenda item number 7. So Danielle, when you're ready, please.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 7 is for the erection of up to 3 dwellings with associated accesses and infrastructure. It's an outline application with all matters reserved, and it's for land west of number 491 March Road in Turves. This slide shows the site location and aerial photographs. There is no development on the north side of March Road within the vicinity, save for number 491 to the east of the site, as you can see. It's clear that the development of the site will encroach into existing open rural land to the north side of March Road. This slide shows how the site can be divided to accommodate the proposed 3 plots, each with their own access off March Road. There are no details of the indicative dwelling layout, so this is outlined with all matters reserved, but it is a matter for members to determine if the principal development is acceptable, along with any material considerations in respect to the indicative proposal for the erection of 3 dwellings in this location. The photo shown to the left-hand side shows the open and rural character of the existing site and the land to the north and west. The top right photo shows number 491 to the east of the site, separated by dense mature vegetation boundary, and the bottom right photo is facing east along March Road, showing the essentially sporadic form of nearby development on the north side of March Road. It is considered that the proposal does not accord with the requirements of policies LP3 and LP12 in respect of the settlement hierarchy, in that it is located outside the built framework of TERVs and does not represent infill. Furthermore, it would encroach into the countryside at the detriment to the rural character of the area. The site is within flood zone 3, but unfortunately the application included no details in respect to the sequential or exception tests, and therefore is contrary to policy LP14. Unfortunately, there is insufficient information provided to demonstrate that visibility and visibility displays, etc., are available from March Road for the proposed accesses. And finally, the biodiversity impacts of the site being developed is a concern to the ecology team, and so they recommend refusal of the application, and therefore the officer recommendation is to refuse.
Yep, thank you, Danielle. We have no speakers, surprisingly, on this application once again, so I'd now like to invite members to put questions to officers. Any questions to officers? Any burning desire to do so? No? To now invite members to debate the item in respect of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. So we're in debate, ladies. Councillor Gerstner, thank you.
Thank you. This was debated at Woodseat Town Council. I wasn't at that meeting, and they have recommended refusal on this as well. I did go down with the ward councillor that covers that area, and we looked at the site, and we think that the officers have got the recommendation correct. That said, TERVs is a very small community. It has little or no infrastructural backup whatsoever. There's a small pub there that's struggling, to say the very least. No bus service at all anymore now. A very limited school bus. So there's no transport whatsoever. There's no shop. Coming from the March side, coming around that corner, it's almost a right-angled corner. You can't really speed around it, but there is limited space between the entrances to these properties that could cause concern, weather dependent. Okay? I think it's a development that could be further developed if these three houses are approved. There's flood risk free caveat on it, and I think the officers have got this correct.
Thank you, Councillor Gerstner. Anybody? Councillor Marks, thank you.
Okay, Fenland Village. What is a Fenland Village? Most Fenland villages on the outskirts are a road in and a road out with houses built either side. So across the road from this at TERVs, there are modern houses, and I'm sure the same objections were previously given when the bungalows were put up there. TERVs, it is a very small village. Additional housing, I'm sure, like I keep hearing from Mainey and most villages, there's nowhere for our families to move to because there's no housing being built in the village. Yes, it's obviously suffering from no bus route. However, I guess most people in TERVs drive anyway. I'm of two minds of this. Yes, it's on a blind corner, as we've heard, but at the end of the day, it is a Fenland village. And if people come around that corner, I drive that road fairly regularly, you go around it fairly slowly anyway. I'm still in two minds. I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Marks. Councillor Benny?
Yeah. I agree with Councillor Marks. I mean, the house is directly opposite, at the same distance from the junction as those, and they were passed. When I went on the planning committee many years ago, one of the very first site visits we did was in Turves, and it was near the pub, and there'd been development going on around the pub. There was houses being built there, and we went back a year or two later, and there was more places being built there. And as much as it's in flood zone 3, well, the whole of Turves is in flood zone 3. If you don't build there, how do you ever pull this place to make it any more than it is? It will decline if it doesn't go forward. You haven't got a bus route. Well, if you don't get your numbers up, you won't get a bus route. It hasn't got a shop. The only way to get these additional services, which bring community benefit, is to put more houses there. And this, to me, with a railway line behind it, serves. It's not exactly infill as in between two plots, but the railway line does put a natural boundary in there. And whenever you build, you try and fill in the gaps before you start building outwards. I certainly wouldn't say this was open countryside. It's got a railway, which is industrial use behind it, and it's got houses on two sides of it. So, see what anyone else has got to say.
Councillor Hicks.
I went out on a site visit the other day, and I had a look at this site, and I was thinking to myself, well, what else could you use this piece of land for? It's too small to farm. I'm yo-yoing backwards and forwards because I can see how that would benefit that particular area, but at the same time, it does open up the rest of that side of that plot to be filled in. And then again, I believe this council, this plan committee actually approved the one, if you look at the actual plan at the bottom, right, that's approval, and that's in a similar situation where it's on the end. So that's a very similar situation. Yes, it's not quite the same situation, but it is a similar sort of situation, and that was approved. So that's my input in the matter.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Hicks, for that. Anybody else got anything to add to it? Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you for your input, councillors. I go back to the local council, their weight on this. I go back to the fact that officers made several recommendations to refuse. I go back to the fact that it's an open field. It may not be farmed at present, but it's classed as open land. And I've stated this before. I know that precedence has been said before. We should be building on not agricultural land if we can. So I still maintain that I would go for officer recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for Councillor Gerstner for that. I'm leaning towards Councillor Marx's and Councillor Benny's point of view, really. It is all in flood zone 3, so if we turn this down, where do we go from here? If you build anywhere apart from that settlement on the, as Councillor Marx says, there's one road in, one road out. Well, there is two roads out in Turves, one to March and then one to Whittlesea and that sort of thing. But where are we going to build this? Are we just going to leave this village isolated? The shop, they won't, if we don't put numbers of people in Turves, they're not going to get a shop, are they? And the pub will most certainly, I would have thought, will struggle even more if we don't grow the population. So I feel that I could support this. I do know that it is close to that corner, but that can be sorted out at a later date. If it doesn't meet with highway regulations, it won't get built, will it? So we could pass it, in my opinion, with a caveat of getting highway approval. But that's just my consideration. I just don't want Turves to die, really. We need little villages like that. People don't want to live in towns, do they? And people should have choice. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Marx.
Thank you. I was just having a quick look here at LPL 12. and as I look at C, it would not have any adverse impact on the character and appearance of surrounding countryside and farmland. Well, I don't actually see it would, really and truthfully. There's a house there's a house where it's bounding onto, and there's houses across the road. The scale, I think it's in scale and in keeping with the shape and form of the settlement. It's within the settlement again. I just feel it's yes, I agree that you can see that given 3 there, there will be add-ons going forward. But is that wrong? That's what the other side of the road, they were just add-ons to there.
Yeah, the railway line does form a natural barrier. You might be looking at a different, I might be looking at it totally different if that plot of land was the other side of the railway line, because there is really sporadic development the other side of the line. There's about 4 or 5 houses, I think, and they're probably associated with farmland. But there, I struggle to think what harm these 3 houses will do. But I'm happy to listen to anybody else and continue the debate. Thanks. Councillor Fimberdon, please.
I just wanted to add, we understand that if there isn't additional development and houses in small villages, they're likely to decline. And like you rightly said, the pub might struggle, is struggling already, might struggle and close, which would be a valuable local infrastructure lost. But I would also like to know why the local council or local town councillors were against the development. Is there any way we can find out?
I don't know if that's a relevant question or not really, because they're not here to answer that, are they? They've just made a recommendation. They didn't feel they could support it. I think I'm definitely right in saying that. I don't know, and I think that's perhaps as far as we can go on that, really, unless you can tell me differently, Nick.
Yeah, through you, Chairman, on paragraph 5.1 of your report says the Town Council recommend refusal as under the FDC local plan. This is not an integral part of the village. Also, highways have requested amendments and there's no report from middle level. So that's their reasoning.
Thank you.
Well, middle level they're not statutory consultees anyway, and they don't usually respond anyway, do they? Sorry, Councillor French.
I was just going to say middle level are not statutory consultees.
That reasoning has gone by the board as far as I can see. Is it in the middle of a village? Well, it is, isn't it? There is clearly there's houses and bungalows, and then there's houses and bungalows to the east. We passed, against officer's recommendation, I do admit 2 more. I think there's 2 more houses coming down towards 3. Might have been 3. Yeah. So we passed 3 there. Theoretically, they're further out of the village, what we've already passed, than these 3 that we're debating today, aren't we? So are we going to be consistent or are we not? So, Charlie, Councillor Mark. Just remind people we're still in debate. It has gone on a bit, but useful points have been raised. Anybody else before I close this debate? No, nobody's got any more to add to it. So, Nick, would you like to come in and clarify any points that have been raised? Thank you.
Yeah, and Danny might wish to add to what I'm about to say. So, when the Fenland local plan was being prepared, what it has to do is establish what's known as a settlement hierarchy, and that settlement hierarchy is used to inform the planning policies for different parts of the district. And very generally speaking, when looking at the settlement hierarchy, that is based upon an analysis of a variety of factors that include, amongst other things, the availability of facilities in a particular settlement and flood risk, but there's a great number of other factors involved. And what we've arrived at in relation to turves is that it's been identified as being a small village, and growth in that area, to quote the policy, is normally to be of very limited nature and normally limited in scale to residential infilling. Okay, so that sets our policy for considering development in that area. And clearly, when the council looked at its settlement hierarchy and chose to identify a limited growth policy for this area, it will have had in mind things like the existing facilities in the settlement. But because of the other issues, clearly it was felt that the restrictive growth policy was the appropriate one for the settlement. And as the case officer, the standing case officer, should I say, has clearly outlined in her presentation to you, this does not conform with policy in that it isn't infill. And as you saw from the photographs, you know, the views northwards from March Road at the site, you know, you're hard pressed to actually spot the railway line in the summer months, because you just have that expansive view to the north, and it's clearly rural in nature. So I don't believe that, hand on heart, you could really conclude that this particular location is within the built-up settlement area. It's clearly outside. Now, turning to flood risk, you know, as has been presented to you in both the report and the verbal presentation, there's been absolutely no attempt to undertake a sequential test in relation to this development. So no matter how hard you try, if this application were to be approved, you could never say that you have given consideration as to whether or not this development has passed the sequential test, because one was never undertaken for this development. So in the face of any challenge whatsoever, you know, we would be found wanting, Chairman. On the issue of highways, yeah, I both myself and the standing case officer, have no doubt that the highway issue has the potential to be resolved, given the fact it's a straight road, etc., etc. But given, and we note that the application is for all matters reserved, including sort of access. But you know, what you'll note from your your viewing of these slides and your knowledge of the area is that you have a series of individual, mostly individual dwellings with their own individual access onto the road, and that's a form of development that you would expect to be replicated. And the highways officer has sort of said, well, I'm not convinced that you could necessarily get all of the required access points in there, because no visibility display information has been submitted, which would have been helpful. So I think there's a good prospect that it could be resolved, but it's not guaranteed, Chairman. I'll stop there. Danny, did you want to say anything else?
No, nothing further. I think you talk about the sequential test, and I'm sure members will sort of use the argument potentially that the whole site is in flood zone 3. However, there is the potential for flood depth information to be submitted, and even if the site, another site within turves, was not necessarily within flood zone 3 but had lesser flood depths, that in turn would be sequentially preferable, but that has not been offered in this case.
I just have to question, Nick, infill. Okay, your definition of infill. We know we were all. If you go from that site and you're going towards the village centre where the pub is, okay, towards that road down there towards the pub, into the main part of the village, we'll say, near all of those plots, all from that end there, are all, there is no infill. There's the gates there, and there's a house that stands back just before you get to the third set of railway gates as you're going into Turves. And then you turn left down to Burnt House Road. There is no infill plots left until you get, I suppose, 400 or 500, 600, 700 yards. I'm not very good at measurements, but 600 or 700 yards until you come to open countryside. I think I'm right in saying that. It's my county area, so I know it fairly well. So I don't think there can be many more. Well, I don't think there'll be any infill plots, to be fair, which would be suitable. Just my observations. Thank you. So, Mark?
Going back to what you just said, did we correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not have the pub have 3 properties behind that? Did we not pass one of those a couple of years ago? Because yeah, it was behind the pub or near the pub. Again, because we had the same conversation there regarding infill. Flood zone 3. This seems to be a topic we keep going round and round with. As we all know, come to Wisbeach, build where you want in flood zone 3. I've seen mitigation now, which amazes me in Maney, again, flood zone 3, in one property, and all they've done is mitigate against it by raising the property. Surely that's for the developer to decide whether they can mitigate against being the flood zone 3 side, not for us. I mean, at the end of the day, I know it's a policy, but it does rather, at times, we go against each other or go against it when we say about Wisbeach and stuff. We just go around in circles with flood zone 3. If the builder can't actually build something that's out of the ground, and also we've given planning permission for the properties across the road, which will have been in flood zone 3.
To follow on from there, sorry to keep harping on about it, but as I said, if we don't give permission for the other side, the north side of that road, Turves will have no more. Will not expand anymore. It'll be stagnant. And unfortunately, as what we know with stagnant services, whatever they've got will close through loss of business, or there'll be. I struggle with this one really, but there. Anybody else want to continue this debate? Councillor Gerstner.
Just to reiterate, this is an outline planning permission, so there are conditions that can be put in at a later stage. I accept that. There are mitigations which highways can put in at a later time. So I accept we're considering outline planning permission here. I'm still sorry to say haven't put my weight on what the town council recommended. Thank you.
That's a fair comment. Anybody want any burning desire to carry on with this debate before I close this debate and bring officers in? Closed officers, would you like to clarify?
Through you, Chairman, the site is plainly not an integral part of the built-up area of the village. It's not an infill site. There's been no attempt at undertaking a sequential test. So those are 3 key policy areas where this development proposal falls short, Chairman.
Yep, thanks, Nick. So I'm looking for a proposal on this. We'll go. So have I got a proposal at all? Councillor Gerstner, what's your proposal? So Councillor Gerstner has proposed that we go with officer recommendation to refuse this application. Have you got a seconder? Councillor Hicks? So could we show of hands on going with officer's recommendation to refuse this application? So can we have a show of hands, please?
2 votes, Chairman.
All those against the officers?
5 votes, Chairman.
Okay, so with that, that's of course that's failed. So we're looking for another proposal now. Who would like to propose? You do. Okay. Okay. So we've got a counter proposal from Councillor Marks to go against officer recommendation to approve this application. Have I got a seconder? Councillor French. With planning reasons.
Sorry, that is something that can be conditioned via CCC. So, do you want any more?
Through you, Chairman, there's the issue of it not being infill. We've got biodiversity, and also in terms of the flood risk, why, despite national policy saying a sequential test has to be undertaken, why one doesn't in this instance.
Because at the end of the day, the whole of Turves is flood zone 3, and we wouldn't build any more properties in Turves.
Chairman, I know that, but the requirement is still for a sequential test to be undertaken.
I still think that even with a sequential test, what it's going to actually just prove is we still need properties in Turves. And there are no other, from what we can see, building properties there.
Okay.
So, Chairman, we've still got the issue of the biodiversity, Chairman, and the infilling.
Sorry, Nick. I think it's my perception that that's not infill. It backs onto another property. It's within Turves itself. I don't believe it's infill. There is properties built on the left-hand side of the road, and so all we're doing is on the right-hand side of the road building some properties. I don't see how you can say that's infill. It borders onto another property.
Through you, Chairman, the policy says only infill will be allowed. So we've got to demonstrate that it is infilling, or there's a reason why a diversion away from our policy is appropriate. So this development only has built development on one side, and the definition of infilling within your local plan is, loosely speaking, a gap between two buildings.
Yeah.
And clearly the next building is a long way away. So we've got to identify reasons why it's appropriate to divert away from this infilling policy.
Well, I can come in there then. Well, in my opinion, there's no more infill sites available in Turves without going out into the open countryside even far more than now. So I don't think there is infill site at all. I went down there Monday, and I've been down there since, and there is no more infill sites. So I think that demonstrates on this particular occasion that we've got to build on that piece of land on that north side. There's no infill sites left. If there was, I could see the relevance of your statement, but if there isn't, there isn't, and that can be proven by anyone just riding down there. And so I think that's
we've got the biodiversity issue.
So we've worked through the other two. So biodiversity, my feelings are we could approve this with a suitable condition of a biodiversity report. We could put a condition in that requires them, as it will do in November, to add, is it a 10% biodiversity plus, back boxes, nesting, a couple more, 3 or 4 more trees probably, or whatever they want. So I think we could probably condition that needs to be sorted out. And if with that conditioning, I'm happy to take Councillor Marks, with my help, the way forward to.
Sorry, I think on biodiversity as well. It's surrounded everywhere around Turves. It's fresh air and fields. You know, we're not building in the middle of a town. What we're doing is building it in a Fenland village. You know, the square area we're taking up with that, whatever is there, will move on quite happily. I don't think we're looking as though we're disturbing badger sets. We're looking to put lots of houses up. It is just purely 3 houses, which I believe Turves, like anywhere else, needs at the present time.
So I think, as I said, just to reiterate, I think we've covered any outstanding problems with this application. So I'm happy to take that.
So, Chairman, before we go to the vote, 2 things in terms of the recommendation approval is that giving delegated authority to officers to put the necessary conditions on the development, and secondly, in terms of the reasons granted, you know, my personal feeling is that there's a number of sort of deficiencies and weaknesses in there, but I have no doubt in my mind that not undertaking a sequential test is a fundamental flaw in approving this development, and should there be a challenge to the decision in any shape or form, I think we would be found wanting on that. So just to flag that to committee before they go to the vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I note that, but I also note that if we, you know, Turves will die because everywhere's in flood zone 3. So I think there's mitigating argument there, to be fair. So I'm happy with that, with those conditions left to officers, although, you know, to sort out. I'm sure the rest of the committee is. So with that, with no further ado, let's go to the vote. So we're going to make a proposal to go against officer recommendation to approve this application with those said conditions. Could we have a show of hands on that proposal, please? Those against?
Two votes.
So that application has been approved with the said conditions. So we're further, oh dear, we're nearly 2 hours in. So I think perhaps we should break now. It's not opportune time to break now and have a cup of coffee, or do what one wants to do, or go to the loo or whatever. Thanks. Right, thank you very much for being back on time. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Danielle Brooke again to present application FYR 230450/F, agenda item number 8. So Danielle, please.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 8 is for the erection of a two-storey, two-bed dwelling facilitated by a part demolition of a single-storey element to the host dwelling at number 44 Robin Goodfellows Lane. The dwelling itself will be situated just to the north of the host dwelling. This slide shows the site location and aerial photo. The site itself is part of the side garden of number 44 Robin Goodfellows Lane on the corner of Robin Goodfellows Lane and Norwood Street, as indicated by the red line. This slide shows the existing and proposed site plans. The proposed dwelling will be positioned within the side garden of the host dwelling, and part of the existing single-storey projection will be demolished to facilitate the development. The garden space will be segregated to allow for private amenity space for both dwellings, with parking for the new dwelling situated to its rear. This slide shows the proposed floor plans and elevations, with the new dwelling essentially becoming the end of terrace dwelling on the existing block. The top left photo is the host dwelling at number 44, taken from Robin Goodfellows Lane. The top right photo is the view of the host dwelling taken from Norwood Street. Part of the single-storey rear projection you can see will be demolished to facilitate the development. The bottom photo is an extract from Google Street View, which shows the similarities of development across either side of Norwood Street. The introduction of a new dwelling on the left-hand side in this picture will clearly enclose the openness of the junction and be incongruous within the street scene. The proposed development will be constructed to the northern side of the host dwelling, which is currently used as residential garden space. It lies within the settlement of March and seeks to create a two-storey end terrace property on land to the north. But whilst there are no technical objections to the scheme from statutory consultees, the proposal is considered to have an adverse impact on the character of the area, providing an incongruous development within the street scene, and therefore it's recommended to refuse the application.
Yep, thank you once again, Danielle. We have one speaker on this application. I'd like to invite Matthew Hall. Of course, he's the agent to make his presentation to the committee. You've got 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on this application. When you read the officer's report, I actually think it sums up the proposal very, very well. I think the actual report's very, very fair. There are no objections from March Town Council, Highways, Environmental Health, and the site's in Flood Zone 1 in the middle of March. Within the officer's report, it states, item 10.5, the overall width of the proposal is similar to other properties in the row, maintaining the uniformity of the surroundings. 10.5, the dwelling is of good quality design, utilising appropriate materials sympathetic to the host dwelling. No impact, item 10.10, no impact on the host property or recently constructed property that was approved by the Planning Committee to the rear by way of loss or light of privacy. Item 10.12, there is sufficient private amenity space for both dwellings. Item 10.15, the Highways Authority has no objections. Report is very fair, very fair. Then you get to the end and it says recommendation for refusal. What's not come out in the report is the planning officer, Brian McParlin, has been proactive and has worked with us on this application, got no complaints at all. After the application had been in a few weeks, I emailed the planning officer, and on the 22nd of June, he came back to me. I've got an email here if anyone wants to have a look, and said, I've reviewed the application and I support the scheme. There are, however, 10 objections, so the application will need to go to Planning Committee for a decision, which we understood, as did the applicant. The earliest committee date for this one will be August, and I will send the conditions for agreement and an extension of time closer to the date, which we agreed to, no problem at all. Just so as I was clear, I did email back the planner, and on the 23rd of June, I've got a copy of an email if anyone wants to have a look. Hi Matthew, I will be recommending approval as I support the scheme. which was, I conveyed that to the applicant, who's a local carpenter stroke builder. And he was very happy, as were we, and we didn't hear anything for 6, 7 weeks, which no problem. Then on Tuesday, the 12th of September, last Tuesday, we obviously got committee notification, and at the bottom it said recommendation for refusal. We have had no phone calls, no emails, no letters, no warning. The applicant quite rightly phones me up and says, Matthew, what's going on? And the answer I gave, I didn't know, because we've had no warning at all. The officer's report is very fair. I've got no issues, and it's quite complimentary, to be honest. Why has it changed at the last minute? Don't know. I don't know. It's got the support of March Town Council, Highways, Environmental Health, located in Flood Zone 1, is in the middle of March. Thank you.
Very interesting. Members' questions for Mr. Hall, please. Is that sign language? Is it that you want to ask a question? No? Any questions for Mr. Hall? No? Oh, yes, Councillor Benny, did you indicate you want to speak? Thank you.
You've just sat here and good afternoon, Mr. Hall. You've just sat here and told us all the way through this was a recommendation for approval, and then at the last minute, no.
That's correct. The application's been in a few months, but the planning officer's kept us well informed. Brian, no complaints at all. I've got 2 emails here if members want to have a look. In June saying I'm going to recommend approval of the scheme. Matthew, which fine, we left it at that, agreed an extension of time. Then on last Tuesday, the 12th, the committee notification was for refusal. The planning officer, to be fair, I think he was on holiday when that came out, to be fair, Brian. But something's changed. We've not changed any drawings. There's been no further consultees. We've not changed anything. I don't know what's changed. I don't know why that's changed.
Thank you.
Is it right?
Councillor Hicks.
Is it right and proper to have a look at that, or is that?
Yeah. You're extremely welcome to go and have a look at that. Yeah.
Members need to see it.
But all members need to take the opportunity of seeing it. That's whether they want to or not. They need to have the chance to. For that, we just convene for 5 minutes while members can have a look at this these trail of emails. Thank you. I'll come and fetch you. Just before we start, interesting these emails are or are not to members. This does not affect the planning merits of this application. They're just, well, it's just how it is. So, we'll go back. Any more questions to Mr. Hall? No burning desire to. Thank you very much. So we'll move on. Questions to officers. Thank you. Any questions to officers? You'd like one? You'd like to answer a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Carry on. This to officers. Yeah.
Why the change of heart? Why going from approval to refusal?
Through you, Chairman. I've not been privy to the emails. I can't access them at the moment, so please forgive me. So I'm stabbing in the dark slightly. So it appears, though I can't confirm it, that the case officer has looked at the application and reported back to the agent that he's comfortable with the proposal, but maybe he didn't run past his thoughts with his line manager before making his thoughts known to the agent. That's the approach that we encourage all staff to take, precisely for the purposes of avoiding this situation whereby a case officer has a particular opinion on it, and they've missed an important factor in the consideration of the case, which the line manager has picked up on. So that appears to be what's happened, though I can't sort of guarantee it. With this type of development proposal, there's an element of subjectivity to it, and you can well understand why different people have a different view on it. The line manager is clear that given the open nature of that junction area, as I'll call it, would be compromised by this proposed development, and that's been outlined by Danny in her presentation to you, and that's shown on the slides. Thank you, Chairman. It is a very unfortunate situation, and I do apologise to both the agent and the applicant.
Okay. But my take on this, wouldn't that, and I don't expect you to comment, but wouldn't that undermine the case officer's opinion at this late stage where he said okay, and then the senior planning officer, shall we say, or the managers of planning or whoever has gone over their heads? That's a bit undermining, I would have thought. I don't think I'd like that to happen to me, but we are where we are. Do you want to speak, Councillor Benny?
Through you, Chairman, very quickly. It all depends where we are on the spectrum, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is that if it was identified to the case officer that they've missed an important aspect of the consideration of the proposal, and case officer reflected and gone, oh yes, fair point, I missed that one, then it's entirely appropriate for the case officer to continue to write up the planning committee report. If, however, there's a fundamental difference of opinion between the case officer and the line manager on a key issue, and the line manager and there's a continuing difference of opinion, then in those circumstances the case officer would be removed from dealing with the application, because you can't ask somebody to write up an application that they don't agree with the recommendation that they're presenting. So in this case, as far as I know, the case officer continued on. So clearly the line manager pointed out that they'd missed an important component in consideration of the application.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak, Councillor Ben? I'll take, and then you and Councillor.
Last committee meeting, Gareth Edwards sat here and told us exactly the same thing. He told us that he'd had an application that was led all the way. Sorry, you were on holiday, but that he had been led all the way, and he had emails to show that this was going to have an approval, and then it was refused. Now, I mean, also looking at this one, this was this Brian. I can't remember his name, and he's a senior planner. That's what it said on the email. I mean, as a senior planner to get something, it doesn't sit well with me. I mean, with this application, there is one reason, which is a very subjective reason for refusal.
That's a fair, valid point, Councillor Benny. Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you. Yeah, it's somewhat concerning. Can we ask for any legal advice on this before we carry on with the thing? Because there's
I don't know what Stephen can actually. Nothing he can actually say, is there?
We've got things in writing. We've clearly got things in writing that state approval, that the case officer's approving this application.
No.
Does that carry any weight at all?
None whatsoever. We've got to look at it. It can carry weight in your own mind, but it can't actually carry weight on this bit, on how we're looking at this. We have to look at what's in front of us. If it's an officer refusal, we take the merits of the officer refusal, and if we think we don't like the officer saying it's refused, we can pass it. But we have to look at things on this application in its entirety as it is.
We're looking at it, on its entirety, but with evidence from the applicant. So this is making me feel somewhat uncomfortable.
Stephen, you can comment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think members need to distinguish between the process that's occurred with all its weaknesses and the decision you need to make today, which is on its planning merits, do I want to approve or refuse this application? So to some extent, how it's been processed and what's been said to the applicant isn't of any relevance to the planning merits. You've got to have an open mind today on what are the planning merits or dismerits in the light of the planning officer's report.
That's the guidance I'm looking for. Thank you.
Okay. Any more? Councillor French.
Thank you. Can I suggest to avoid this happening again that Nick actually has a word with the line manager and the planning officers because it doesn't reflect very well on this council.
Seeing as knowing Nick as I do, I'm sure he will be having the appropriate conversation. I'm fairly certain of that because it doesn't, as Councillor Gerson says, it doesn't sit very well with him, and I'm sure everybody around this table would concur with his comments. But anyway, moving on from there. Okay. Oh, Councillor Marks.
This is really to Nick. This fundamental flaw that we've suddenly come up with, having said all the way along yes, 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 and then all of a sudden no. Would that be this, or would it be a bigger item?
Sorry, I'm not quite
Right.
following the question.
Okay. It doesn't. At the end of the day, it seems like the officer who's been dealing with it all the way along, if he's missed this is not such a major. You're saying it's a fundamental flaw that suddenly somebody's identified. Would this be the fundamental flaw? Would there be other things behind this decision as well to try and refuse?
Through you, Chairman, I'm not sure whether or not you misunderstood what I said. I was asked the question about whether or not it was appropriate for the case officer to have written this report given the feedback that they'd given the agent. And what I explained is that if it was pointed out to the officer that they'd missed something in the consideration of the application, and they went, oh yes, I did miss that issue, I've reflected on it, and I do agree with you that it's no longer appropriate to recommend approval for the scheme, then it's entirely appropriate for that case officer to remain the case officer. And that is what appears to me to be the situation here.
Okay. Does that answer any of your concerns, Councillor Marks? Not really, but we'll move on. Okay. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, I mean, if no. If I was a planning officer and I went to a senior or in any position, and I went to my line manager, and my line manager said, "I don't agree with you," that I was going to be taken off. Surely that's if that happened regularly, I would not feel comfortable. I would not be happy working like that, because that's undermining. Especially if you're going to be taken off a case after you put a lot of work into it, to be taken off a case and then be moved to somewhere else or that given to somebody else. That's not. I wouldn't feel comfortable working under that.
Thanks. And then we're going to move on to a different subject.
I don't want to keep going over this, but all I would say is surely there must be a process of checking somebody's work before any correspondence is sent out in future, so we don't have this happen again.
Through you, Chairman, this isn't the appropriate forum to discuss workflows and processes.
I think
what's been suggested is clearly unfeasible, shall we say. At the end of the day, officers should not be proffering an opinion on the acceptability or otherwise of a development proposal to an agent unless they've had the clearance of the line manager who will be signing off the decision notice or the report to committee at the end of the day. And that appears to be what's happened here, is that someone's proffered an opinion without making sure that that opinion aligns with the line manager's opinion on the case.
So I'll come in here. I think we've done this now to death. I think we should go back now to look at the merits or not of the application now. So got any more questions for David on the merits of the application, officer questions, without going back to how we've been for the last 5 minutes, or I will go into debate. Any more questions for Nick? No? Councillor Benny?
Yeah. Maybe you refresh my memory. I'm sure we had something very similar, if not here, come before the council. Councillor Cornwall was certainly on the committee then, because it was in his ward. Very, very similar to this, the same side of the road, and we approved that. It was some time ago. You were certainly chairman. Do you remember?
I can remember that very vividly, Councillor Benny. It was in the same house, his garden further on, and officers went obviously didn't agree with it, so offered to refuse. Councillor Cornwall spoke as a local member against it, and the committee, in their infinite wisdom, passed it against officer recommendation. I don't know if that jogs your mind at all. Would you like to carry on?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Because I remember us passing an application that was very similar to this one.
Quite right.
Yeah, and that comes back to LP 16D subjective. Is this a good application or not? From memory, I remember voting for it for the last one, and obviously for that one, I felt it was a positive contribution. Okay, thank you very much.
Right, we're in debate still. Anybody like to add to that before I come in? Councillor Gerstner?
I concur. It's in the notes here that the previous application in the same property, and that was granted in 2020. Right?
Indeed,
I also make the comment that March Town Council's recommended approval as well. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, looking at the recommendation for refusal, or LP 16D, now I know policies are always how we interpret, sometimes we interpret different to what officers, but I don't believe that it does not accord with D. And then if you go to E, it does not adversely impact on the immunity of neighbouring users such as noise, light, etc. The report is very good. when I got to the end of it and read it, I was very surprised that it was recommended to be refused. So I just interpret a policy different to officers.
Okay, well, I'll come in there now then. Right, I did a site visit on Monday, mid-morning now, I suppose, and went to the application site, and I was extremely pleased of what the building we approved against officer recommendation bordering. It's obviously down Norwalk Street, but obviously the host property is on Robin Goodfellas Lane. And to be fair, it looked a proper job. It looked very, very nice. It was white, and it was clean, it was tidy, and I think it was a credit to the guy who built it. But then I look on the other side of the road, on the sister corner plot, the other way round. It's exactly the same plot, but on the other side of the road, and that's all overgrown. I don't know what reason it's overgrown, and I'm not going to go into that, but it certainly looked better than the other side of the road. It was more in keeping. So, looking at it, I just feel, on planning balance, I feel that I would support this application. I don't think it'll affect the street scene at all. And if it does, it'll be for the better, because the other one made a huge difference to the street scene. So I can't really see why this wouldn't as well. So I'm going to listen to what other people say, but I do feel at the moment that I could support this application. Debate. Anybody like to add to that? Councillor Hicks?
Yeah, I'd like to concur with Councillor Conway, mirror what he said entirely, and then that's it for me. I agree with everything he said.
Anybody else want to add to this discussion? No? I'm going to close the discussion now. Nick, would you like to come in for summing up or some clarification? Thank you.
Nothing further to add. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. So basically, I'm looking for a proposal to go with officer recommendation to refuse this application. Have I got a proposer for this? So initially I'm looking for that. Anybody want to go? No, I can't see anything. So that's obviously failed. That's got no support whatsoever. So I'm looking for another proposal, please. Okay.
On the grounds you so well spoke out a minute ago about the improvement of the area and no effect on.
Okay. So I'm looking for you to. You're proposing to go against officer recommendation to approve this building block or this building. Seconded by Councillor French. Now we need reasons why you're going against officer recommendation, please, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Okay, that seems fair to me. So, with that, I'm going to just reiterate the proposal again to go against officer recommendation to approve this application, proposed by Councillor. I think Councillor French is going to second it. All those in favour of that proposal, with conditions given to officer, although they mustn't be too arduous. Reasonable conditions. And if you don't mind, while we're doing the counting, I wouldn't mind having a look at the conditions on that one, please. I don't know if anybody else would, but I certainly would. You'd like to as Councillor French as well, would you? And you would as well. Thank you.
It's a unanimous decision, Chair.
So that application has been approved. Thank you. With those conditions. So We have one speaker on this application, and I'd like to invite Shana Jackson. She's, of course, the agent, to make her presentation to the committee. You've got 5 minutes, Shana, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of this application. As you've just heard, the application is for up to 6 dwellings and is submitted in outline with all matters reserved. Members will recall a previous application which was for up to 9 dwellings. In their previous considerations, members raised concerns with regards to flooding and ecology. Noting these concerns, we've spoken directly to middle-level commissioners who've confirmed that they are not aware of any flooding or surface ponding issues on the site, and this has been the case for over 20 years. We've also commissioned an ecology report, given the drain to the front of the site, and the ecology officer has raised no objection to the proposal. The ecological mitigation measures suggested by a condition are duly accepted by the applicant. We understand there were previous concerns with highway safety, and as such we've revised the site access to a single point, which County Highways are happy with, and this is an approach which was previously supported by officers. Moving on to the merits of this case, the scheme would result in the construction of 6 new dwellings in March. Policy LP3 states that March is a primary market town and should therefore be a focus for new development. The proposal would support growth within March by providing additional housing, which is supported by Policy LP3. The very nature of growth is that it's inevitable that development will extend the town into the open land beyond the existing footprint. On this site, we can provide 6 large detached and high-quality design dwellings, which set the scene on the approach into March. I'd therefore argue that the proposed first reason for refusal can be overcome. With regards to the second reason for refusal, we propose a single access as a result of the feedback given to us on the previous application. However, access is not committed, and therefore should members prefer multiple single points of access, we'd be happy to work with officers and County Highways at reserved matter stage to reach an agreeable outcome for all. You'll note from the report that there are no technical objections to the application, and the objection from the Town Council is overcome by reasons of the comments received by the middle-level commissioners and County Highways. The application is an outline and it's for up to 6 units. And therefore the number of dwellings and matters of layout and scale can be discussed later if there are concerns with overdevelopment. The proposal represents a technically acceptable form of development which would provide housing and therefore support growth within a primary market town, and we therefore respectfully request that planning permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jackson. Members, questions, clarifications to Mrs. Jackson, please. Councillor Gerstner, thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Can you confirm that the site at the moment is an agricultural field being farmed?
Yes, it's in agricultural use and it's actively farmed.
So if approval was given for these houses,
yeah,
what I can't tell from the indicative picture, how much of that agricultural land would be lost?
I don't know if you can tell from the location plan. The land in question is very small, but our client's land ownership is much larger. So you can see the wider field there. All of that's within their ownership to the east and south.
To the left there, okay, the left centre, I can see the field to the right. That you can see that's being farmed by the ranger. To the left of that, where it's green, is that being farmed?
Yeah. So at the moment, it's been. I think I'm not very good with farming, sorry, but I think it's laid to grass and then it's cut for hay.
Right.
And that's just the case at the minute when that photo was taken. But it is, it is agricultural in land use.
It's just, if I can interject, that's grade 3 agricultural land, Councillor Gerstner. Yeah, okay. Any more questions for Mrs. Jackson at all before we let her go? No, thank you very much. Members, questions to officers? Anything at all, members? No? No, okay. So, members, we're going to debate the application now. Who'd like to kick that off? Councillor French, thank you.
Thank you. I'm surprised this has actually come back. There's 18 letters supporting this. I'm absolutely amazed where this support is coming from. Coldham Bank, Russell's Avenue, Robin Goodfellows Lane, everything the other side of town. Absolutely amazing. I think the officers have got this right. If this application is approved, it is just going to be sprawling and sprawling and sprawling further down Atwell Road. I totally agree with the officer's recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor French. Councillor Gerstner, and then Councillor Marks. Thank you.
Thank you. Very similar to the a previous application, but although this is agricultural land, and I'll fully support the officer's recommendation and Councillor French's, it's got an opportunity to take away good agricultural land that's being farmed, and I'm totally against it. Thank you.
Councillor Marks.
I concur with everything that's just been said. I also really concerned regarding speeding along that road as well. There's already a speed hump there. If we make individual accesses, that's going to make things even worse. And one access, I still think, is going to cause a problem. I think March has got as far as it needs to go along Christchurch Road, and where it is now, it doesn't need to go any further out into the open countryside.
Okay. Anybody else would like to add to the debate before I bring in the officers for anything they may want to add? No, debate's closed. Nick, would you like to say something? Okay. So now we'll move on. As mentioned previously, I'll be initially looking for a proposer to go with officer recommendation to refuse this planning permission. So we see Councillor French has got her hand up to refuse it. Has she got a seconder? It's Councillor Marks. Thank you, you guys. So we've got a proposition to go with officer's recommendation to refuse this application. It's been proposed by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Marks. All those, show of hands on that proposal, please.
It's a unanimous decision, Chair.
That application needs to say it's been refused. Thank you. So, moving on, I'll now hand over to Nick Harding to present application FYR 23-0556F, agenda item number 10. So, Nick, would you like to kick that off, please? Thank you, when you're ready.
Thank you very much. We've got a planning application before you for 4 dwellings, single-storey bungalows at land south of 85, 89 Upwell Road, March. It's a resubmission, so it's a site that's familiar to most of the planning committee members. The site is edged in red. Committee granted planning consent for up to 6 dwellings on the site and subsequently received an application for 6 2-storey dwellings, and that was refused by committee on a number of grounds. So firstly, it was the layout, scale, massing and design of the properties failed to take into account the character of the area and the openness of the site and the built character of Upwell Road, and also that it would impact on the sort of qualities of the urban and rural area. It also, with the 6 dwellings, would impact on the residents either side of the access road, with a number of comings and goings from the new development. Thirdly, the size and proximity of the 2 plots that abutted the properties on Upwell Road, existing ones, would have a detrimental impact on their amenity and be too dominant. And finally, a drainage reason for refusal. So we've got a revised proposal for 4 units. As I said, it's single-storey bungalows. It's within the, well, it's slightly different in terms of the location of the proposed balancing pond to the previous scheme. You'll note from the report that it has 2 reasons for refusal. One of those relates to the impact of comings and goings from the 4 dwellings, to the houses either side of the access. Given that permission was granted at outline for up to 6 dwellings, I don't think that we could sustain that as a reason for refusal, and therefore that's now been dropped as a reason for refusal. So that leaves us with the reason for refusal that relates to the layout and design of the development and its relevance to the nature of development in the area and the location of the site adjacent to the sort of countryside area as set out in your committee report. So we've got some additional slides showing the design of the bungalows. That's the drainage areas proposed, the levels drawing, some drainage infrastructure related to the surface water scheme. And here's the pictures of the site. So that shows the entrance into the site with the existing bungalows either side. And then you've got shots of the site, which is just laid to grass at the moment. And as I've said, we're down to one reason of refusal, which is identified in the sort of final dot, the final bullet point on this particular slide. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you again, once again, Nick. We have one speaker on this application, and I'd like to invite Chris Walford. He's, of course, the agent to make his presentation. It can be when you're seated and start when you're ready. Of course, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Firstly, good afternoon, members, and thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of this application. As confirmed by Nick in his introduction, the site does have an extant permission for up to 6 dwellings, and that was approved by committee back a couple of years before. The subsequent application we made for reserved matters, it was originally a reserved matters application for 6 2-storey dwellings, was refused. That application was converted to a full application because the pond to the rear of the site was outside of the red line, and therefore we couldn't control that or secure that by condition, and therefore we converted that to a full application so that the red line could encompass the pond as well. The general steer from the members at the time on that scheme was that bungalows would be more suitable on the site, and it would eliminate overlooking issues and be more in keeping with the local area and the character. This application that we have in front of us now takes on board exactly those comments, now proposes bungalows and goes one step further to reduce it from 6 down to 4, which he felt was again more in keeping with the scale and the designs of the bungalows at the front of the site. As before, this application is a full again because we've got the pond outside of the outline red line. The reason we've done that is it was depicted in the original outlines ecology report. It was approved in that report being in the field, and we've kept true to that throughout, but unfortunately, sort of planning technicality, it can't be secured. Regarding the drainage and flooding concerns that were raised previously, we've now accompanied this application with a detailed specialist drainage report that proposes a wildlife pond, and all surface water from the development will discharge into that pond. The pond is designed to allow adequate flow and holding for the 100-year plus the 40% runoff, as we've been requested to do so. The water held in that pond will slowly discharge to the existing boundary drain on the left, if you're looking at the plan, and it's restricted in its flow to greenfield runoff. And by that, it essentially cannot leave the pond at any quicker rate than it would have done had the pond not been there. It's the same rate that if it had gone into the grass and flowed into that drain, that pond does not allow that water out at any quicker rate. And at that result, we do not need consent. This is the guidance I've taken from the drainage designer. Because of that rate, we do not need consent to do that. And in theory, we have no reason to believe or doubt that there would be any issue with the drainage or the flooding. One other quick thing I'd just like to touch on is the Town Council's objection to this application. They supported the original 6, the outline for 6, that was supported. They supported our scheme for reserved matters for 6 2-storey. They supported that one. But yet they've refused or recommending refusal of our 4 bungalows. Their reason was a one-line comment just saying it's outside of the DAB. I tried to get in contact with the clerk to clarify, could they expand on that, or was there an error because they'd supported the previous two? She acknowledged that that had been discussed, and I'm still sort of waiting to hear back. I haven't had a formal clarification on that matter, so I thought I'd just flag it so that you know where we are with that objection. Apart from that, I'm available to answer any questions, and I hope you can support this application.
Members, questions to Mr. Walford or clarifications? Councillor French.
Yeah, I can give a clarification. The reason the committee at Marktown Council recommended refusal is a new committee after the elections in May.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Any more questions for Mr. Walford, please? I don't see any burning desire to do so. Thank you very much. Questions to officers, members? No? Oh, Councillor Gerstner, sorry.
My usual one, looking at the access road and the input, refuse wagon again, are they going to get access? No.
Through you, Chairman, either private collection is going to have to be arranged by the residents, or alternatively, the bins are going to have to be put at the top of the access road.
Okay. Any more questions to officers at all? No. Right. Thank you. I'd invite members to debate the item in respect of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Councillor French, thank you.
Thank you. We seem to have a flood of applications for Upwell Road at the moment. I don't know what's going on in Upwell Road. Again, I totally agree with officers. They have this right. LP 16, I'm going to interpret it the same way as the officers do on D, and I will not support this. I will not support this application being approved.
Still in debate, everybody? Anybody want to continue the debate? No, can't see any burning desire to. So I'm going to close the debate now. Nick, would you like to? Very short debate.
Nothing from me.
Nothing. So I'm going to ask anybody now to go with support the officer's proposal to refuse this application. So we've got a proposer to go with that, to refuse the application by Councillor French once again. Have we got a seconder for that applicant for that? Councillor Gerstner. So just to reiterate, to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application proposed by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Gerstner. Can I have a show of hands on that proposal, please? I'm voting against. I'm voting for it.
6 votes, then. And 1 vote.
Yep, so the application has been refused. Thank you. Go on to the last one. I'll hand over now to Daniel Brooke to present FYR 23059330, agenda item number 11. So Danielle, please.
Agenda item 11 is an outline application with matters committed in respect of access for the erection of up to 2 dwellings on land north of 15 Badgney End. It's before members today owing to the number of representations contrary to officer recommendation. The location plan and aerial photo are shown and the site edged in red. The site is located on agricultural land to the east of the built framework of March. As you can see, there is limited sporadic development nearby, but the site is clearly divorced from the main built form of March that can be seen to the west and bounded by the railway line. The indicative site layout is shown here. The plan denotes that the site is sufficiently large enough to accommodate up to 2 dwellings with individual accesses to each proposed off the single track roadway of Badgney End. These photographs show the distinctly rural nature of the application site and the openness of the countryside in the vicinity. Photo 1 shows the current state of Badgney End Road to which the 2 accesses are proposed to join. Photo 2 shows the outbuildings to the south of the site associated with the adjacent Badgney farm. This photograph is an extract from Google Street View showing the development nearest the site, with the site location denoted by the red arrow. It should be noted that the dwellings shown within this picture, including Badgley Cottage, denoted by the yellow star, and Badgley Farm, denoted by the blue star, the presence of these developments on these sites predate planning itself, with possibly as early as 1886, as shown in the historical map excerpt below the picture, with the area remaining largely unchanged in terms of development, with agricultural fields to the north. So the application is outlined for 2 dwellings. It's refused on the basis of encroachment into the agricultural field and doesn't afford the settlement hierarchy against LP3 and LP12. Furthermore, the site is located in flood zone 3, and again, no sequential exception tests were put forth on this application. So again, it is recommended to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. We have 2 speakers on this application and 1 written representation. First, I'd like to invite Victor Aveling, speaking in support of the application, to make his presentation to the committee. You've got 5 minutes, when you're nice and sitting comfortably, of course. Thank you.
That's got it. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Victor Aveling. I own these 2 plots, together with about 90 acres adjacent. I've lived in Badgley End since 1966, and my family have owned land here since well before the Second World War. Badgley End was originally part of Silk Road until all the residents were most concerned when the unmanned railway crossing was being used by people visiting them. And there had been some very close calls with the trains. We therefore asked for this section of road to be renamed Badgley End. Railtrack regard these unmanned gates as an occupational crossing. As there's been no objection from the County Council, they propose closing them for public use. Thus, Badgley End will become a cul-de-sac at the end of Badgley Road. There are 6 dwellings here at present. 3 of them are occupied by people over 80 years of age, me included, and so the addition of a few younger people would be an advantage to our small community. I realise that several people are worried that this application is the first step to creating a housing estate. None of us want this area to become a housing estate. When I first moved here in 1966, it was all arable land with only 2 or 3 trees. Since then, we've tried to improve the natural environment by planting about 700 trees and allowing the area around the pond and alongside the river to grow naturally. I think under modern name it's called wilding. I know that this is appreciated by many people who use the footpath along the Nene. I mow the footpath every week, and they tell me about it, and I've never had to collect any litter, as this is done by all those walkers. I feel there's a shortage of plots in March where people can build their own homes to their own design. And I know that the 2 gentlemen concerned told me that they'd been searching for some time for somewhere to build their own houses. I've read comments about the risk of flooding. To my knowledge, there's been no flooding here within living memory. It was safe during the Great Flood of 1947, and I'm sure it was not capable of being flooded after the steam-driven beam engine was installed here in the mid-19th century. I'm always puzzled about talk of flood risks. I think the environment agencies class all the fens as a floodplain and measure the flood risk as though there were no drainage works. The only danger to our drainage system is if developments cause so much runoff that the drainage authorities cannot cope. Of course, in this particular case, all the runoff can be absorbed within the site. As a matter of interest, one of the first acts when Fenland District Council came into being was to decide that the council would pay all the drainage rates that were due on residential and commercial property. They considered that the whole of Fenland benefited equally from the drainage works and not just those liable for drainage rates. And the drainage rates certainly confused many ratepayers. The classic example was Station Road in March, where one side of the road paid rates and the other side didn't. And halfway down, the sides changed. In summary, both my son and I live at Badgley End, and we think we've done our best to create a pleasant natural environment here. The last thing we want to is to have this all ruined by a housing development.
30 seconds.
Sorry? If I had the long-term view of having a housing estate, we would have registered it with the council when they were asking for potential sites some time ago. However, we don't think that the 2 additional houses will be out of place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aveling. Questions, clarifications from Mr. Aveling? Councillor Gerstner. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your presentation, and very commendable you planted all those trees. Thank you. Can I ask you, is that field being farmed at present?
It's being farmed at present, yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
I'm there.
Anybody else got? Oh, Councillor Marks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Aveling. The farmyard, as we look at this now, beside where these 2 proposed properties are going to be, do you believe in future time people will try and do barn conversions and stuff?
Do I believe in future time?
You're coming back to us to try and do barn conversions and stuff with more houses along there?
Well, I've just said that's the last thing we want. We don't want a housing estate down there. And we spent a lot of time and energy trying to create a very pleasant environment down there, and we don't want it ruined, because we live there.
Okay, that I understand. So why have 2 more properties then?
Sorry?
Why ask for 2 more properties?
Why am I asking for 2 more?
Yeah.
Well, I explained that half the houses down there are occupied by people over 80, and we've always had a little community down there where we've helped each other. And I didn't see any harm in getting another couple of houses when we're all getting so ancient. 2 people I know were looking for houses, so I said, well, we'll apply to see if we can get you down there, because it would be very pleasant to have 2 people we know down there to make part of our community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else at all? Oh, Councillor, if you're done.
I just want to ask quickly, the barns that we see in the images, are they being used at the moment? Because I'm looking on Google Maps, and it's an old photo, but they look like they're dilapidated and overgrown. Are the barns currently in use?
Are the barns currently on the photo, are they being used, Mr. Aveling?
All the barns I've got on our farm are in use. Sorry, I'm a little bit deaf.
No worries at all. No, carry on. No. So you're happy with that, Mr. Aveling's answer. Thank you. Councillor Benny.
Good afternoon, Mr. Aveling. These plots, are they in any way in connection with the farm? Are these 2 plots that you're looking for, are they in any way connected to the working farm for farm workers?
Mr. Aveling, I think Councillor Benny's saying the 2 plots you're applying for,
Yes?
are they in connection with your farming business?
No, they're not. In fact, none of the houses down there are now occupied by anyone in the farming agricultural business.
Anybody got any more questions?
Sorry?
No, No, it's been a pleasure for you to do this presentation. Any more questions before we let Mr. No? 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 Okay then, thank you so much, Mr. Aveling.
Thank you very much, sir.
Right. Moving on then. Now we'd like to invite Member Services to read out a written representation from Mr. Douglas Sawyer. He's the applicant. So would you like to do that, Joe, please, when you're ready? Thank you.
Dear Planning Committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at the meeting regarding our planning application. Firstly, a few things about myself. I have lived and worked in March my entire life, along with most of my family, and my wife has lived here for 20 years plus. We have 2 children who attend either secondary school or college. Through our work, me and my wife both support many local charities and regularly take part in fundraising. We are already registered with a local doctor's surgery that we have used for 20 years, and we pay privately for both ourselves and our children's dentists. Through extensive searching, we have found no other executive-style homes for sale in March that suit our needs. The house will not only provide a home, but also allow us to build a workshop and store as our local business continue to expand. Our intentions are to plant extra trees around our boundaries to offer new habitats for local wildlife. Me and my wife both work for ourselves locally, myself as a builder and landscape gardener, and my wife as a full-time baker and local market trader. It is our wish for us and our children to stay within the March area, as we have built a client base and friendships here. We believe that this plot will allow us to do this, and in the process will free our 4-bedroom home in the middle of town to another young family. Thank you again for the opportunity to explain a little bit about why we would like to build this home.
Thank you very much.
Sincerely, Douglas Sawyer.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Joe. Now invite Matthew Hall, of course he's the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. Matthew, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on this application. As members will have seen in the report, there are no objections from Highways Environment Agency, Environmental Health or Archaeology. The proposal allows, in our opinion, for a net gain in biodiversity with the opportunity to plant trees, hedges, bat boxes, hedgehog homes, bird boxes, etc. There are no trees to be removed or no ditches to be infilled as part of this development. 3 of the applications are on the agenda this afternoon. Flood Zone 1, some in partially Flood Zone 1, Flood Zone 3, and some in obviously Flood Zone 3. And all of those applications are all various types. But all of them, not just this one, all of them were recommended for refusal by March Town Council. Within the officer report, under item 9.5, it states the site is not physically isolated due to the existence of nearby dwellings. That's what the officers wrote, not me. The officer does raise concern with regards to a lack of nearby services. However, down Badginey Road, there is a shop, and I disagree about the comment in the report about a bus stop, because I believe last time I was down there, there's a bus stop outside that shop, which is down Badginey Road. The bin lorry also accesses Badginey End, and in Badginey End, there's also all the infrastructure present in the road. There have been other applications recently approved by the Planning Committee that are in Flood Zone 3 against officer recommendation, where the officer believes the proposal would be away from the built-up form of March. First one is land west of 167 Gould Road, March. That site was in Flood Zone 3, away from the built-up form of March, the officer said, and that was approved by a Planning Committee against officer recommendation in April 2023. Second application, land west of Broadlands, Whitemoor Road, March. That was for 3 plots. That was in Flood Zone 3. The officer considered that that was away from the established built-up form of March, and that was approved against officer recommendation in April 2023. To give a bit of clarification on what Councillor Marks brought up about the barns next to this site, those aren't in the ownership of Mr. Aveling. That's somebody else owns those. This site would allow 2 executive dwellings adjacent to an existing dwelling and barns. We've heard about the flooding from Mr. Aveling, who's lived down there for 60 years. There are no objections from Highways, Environmental Health with proposed mitigation measures which have been approved by the Environment Agency. There's no loss of vegetation, and in our opinion, there'd be a net gain in biodiversity. Thank you.
Very interesting, Mr. Hall. Members, questions for Mr. Hall? Councillor Marks, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hall. We've just heard from one of the applicants, and I heard workshop to be built as well. Is he looking to run his business from there?
So there's two applicants. One of the applicants, Mr. Sawyer, is a landscape gardener, lives in town, stroke small builder. He would look to build, if we got approval, a larger than normal garage where there'd be a bit of a store there only for himself. There'd be no members of the public there. He'd have his tools in, plant, etc. He works generally for himself or one or two other people with him. So it would be there'd be a store on site for his own materials.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, Mr. Abing doesn't own the barns.
Correct. The barns in the photo at the back, that's in separate ownership. He doesn't own those.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. They're next door, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Councillor Gerstner?
Thank you. Next one, there's no pathway, no street lighting on that road?
Correct.
More questions for Mr. Hall before we let him go? Bear in mind the time. Nope. No, thank you very much. Members, questions, clarifications to officers, have you got any? I'm looking round in anticipation and can't find anything. So we'll do that. So we'll close that. So we'll thank you everybody. And now I'd like to invite members. Oh, sorry. Okay.
If I may,
Yeah, absolutely.
just to clarify, the application has not been made on the basis of an agricultural dwelling, and it's not being made on the basis of custom or self-built properties, notwithstanding what was said by the speakers. They've ticked the box on the application form to say it's market housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Councillor Marks.
And can you confirm also no mention of workshops or business? No.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Before we wrap up, any more questions, clarifications for officers at this late stage? No, thank you. So I'd now like to invite members to debate the item in respect of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. So we're in debate, ladies and gentlemen. Who wants to kick this off? Councillor Marks?
I think I am concerned to hear workshop, plant. That road is not the greatest road in the world to be taking lorries. I know there's agricultural traffic goes up and down there, but we may be, when you hear that sort of stuff, that's bigger lorries and stuff. And also, I have a concern, those barns suddenly, if we give this, those barns then will fall into being very marketable value for barn conversions as well.
Councillor Gerstner?
Again, I'd like to be consistent on this. Agricultural land that's being farmed presently for two dwellings there on a very narrow road with no footpath, no lighting. Same concern as Councillor Marks. The potential of a workshop stroke business being coming there potentially. I know it may not be planning reasons at this time, but it all could lead to problems on that road. But I'm trying to be consistent with this agricultural land being built on. So, thank you.
Indeed you are, Councillor Gerstner. Still in debate, anybody wants?
Oh, I'll
just come back, yeah, because I don't think there's too many other people want to say too much. No, so we've finished the debate, have we? Nobody wants to add to it at this late stage? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, just to highlight that the loss of agricultural land per se is not a reason for refusal that officers have put forward. In addition, the proposal before us is for two dwellings, so nothing about operation of a business from the properties is mentioned in the application, so we can't really use that to determine the application. And finally, what may happen in the future for the barns is for a future application. As members will well know, the planning legislation around barn conversions these days is pretty darn generous and due to get even more generous. So if we get an application for conversion, that will be dealt with appropriately. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. So thank you for summing that up, Nick. As mentioned previously, I'll be looking for a proposer to go with officer recommendation to refuse this planning permission. So we're looking for officer to refuse. Have we got a proposer for that? Councillor Gerstner and Councillor Marks. So just to reiterate, we've got a proposer to go with officers to refuse this application, proposed by Councillor Gerstner, seconded by Councillor Marks. Can we have a show of hands on that proposition?
That's 6 votes, Chairman.
Those against? Councillor French obviously has done a declaration, so it seems to me that's unanimous, isn't it? Yes. So the application has been refused. Thank you very much.